of 40% over last year's budget, but won't let us see the legal opinion. And Mr. Secretary, you know what kind of thinking we do. If you've showed us the legal rationale for 2 wars and you won't show us the legal rationale for the third, is there something in the rationale they don't want us to see? Is there a dissenting opinion that says it's not legal? Are there conditions like you can't strike civilian infrastructure like schools and bridges? Are there factual assertions like the war will be over in 2 days or Iran will never close the Straits of Hormuz? By not sharing the legal opinion with the Article I oversight branch, you give us the opinion that there's something in there you don't want us to see. Could you use your influence as the president's chief national security advisor, Secretary of State, NSA, to get the administration to share the Iran war legal opinion with Congress?
Well, look, first of all, obviously the Department of State does not develop the legal opinion. That's
but you're the
legal counsel.
You're the chief national.
So I think what you're asking is why haven't the Office of Legal Counsel provided it? They don't work for the National Security
I'm
Council.
actually
They don't
asking,
work for me.
Will you use your influence as
well, I will certainly inquire as to why. Here's what I'll do.
advisor.
I can certainly inquire as to why it has not been available. I don't think there's a reason why. I am not aware that. In fact, my understanding is they have provided documentation to the committee and
not the opinion.
as part of the war.
Not the opinion.
Well, that's different.
And you wouldn't accept that.
All right, well, let me take that back and ask the
Office
Office of Legal Counsel. But it's certainly, they provided the legal rationale for the strike. You're asking for the actual written opinion the way it was in the other.
Which they provided us
All
in
right,
Southern Spirit and Absolute Resolve.
I'll
Thanks,
take
Mr.
that
Chair.
back.
Thank you. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Secretary Rubio, for being...
You look like rickets. I apologize. This threw me off a second.
Well, look, bald is beautiful, and we can't help that. But thanks for all of your efforts. You are a very effective spokesperson for not only President Trump and the administration, but for the United States, and I'm grateful for that. Was wondering at the outset if you could talk to us a little bit about the fractured Iranian regime and how that might be making negotiations more difficult. One of the things I've wondered, for example, are whether the diplomatic Iranian channels are sort of crosswise, at odds with, or working hand in glove with the IRGC, which is itself causing a lot of these ceasefire violations, or is it all sort of coordinated chaos to try to undermine and tip the scales in favor of Iran in the negotiations?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me try to give this answer to you in a way that's not boring or wonky, because it's been a shift. Obviously, the original Supreme Leader, the one that was there, is no longer with us. His son takes over. Nobody hears from him for a month. By all reports, open source reporting, I think you've all seen it. He was severely injured in the same strike, and so forth.
Are you confident he's still alive, by the way?
Yeah, I think there's indications that, in fact, we've not heard from him publicly. We haven't seen him publicly, and I would imagine, given what's happened to multiple leaders in that system, being very public is probably not something that's recommended for them internally. But that said, I think there are indications out there that he is increasingly engaging at some level, although all of his communications have been in writing and through intermediaries. So the way to think about it is the following. You have the Supreme Leader, and understand that at the end of the day, the Supreme Leader in their system there really is no analogy to it in our system or anybody else's system. It is a theological office. It was the head of the Islamic Republic in the sense of the ultimate decision maker, and every major decision has to be run by them. They are advised by a council. It's not clear if it's 6 people or 8 people, but there is a council made up of both IRGC and other elements of the regime that surround that Supreme Leader. And ultimately, that council has to sign off on anything. And then there are the people you see on TV, like Arachi, who's out there every single day, and Ghalibaf, who's the Speaker of the Majils, who's been playing a pretty prominent role. And they are the ones that they have sent to negotiations and so forth. It is our view of the system, as we understand it, and as it's been expressed to us both by the intermediaries and by Iran directly, that what Arachi and Ghalibaf bring or take from us, they then have to run back to this council and ultimately get guidance from them. And that process oftentimes takes 3 to 5 days to get a response. Now, some of it is logistical. They're operating probably using couriers and things of this nature. Part of it is internal fissures on exactly what they should agree to or not agree to. I think the second point that needs to be driven in this regard is that there is evidence that there are communications issues within the regime as well. So, for example, it's pretty clear that at the outset of hostilities and the conflict, they had delegated decision-making to field commanders. And so oftentimes field commanders had delegated authority to act on let's say, a pre-operational planning that already put in place. And so unlike our system, where perhaps you know that the president or the secretary of war is directly making orders and decisions, or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, in their system, a lot of decision-making at the tactical level, like which ships to hit and so forth, are being made at the commander level. So that's
why from the outset it can look like fire-ready aim, but it's part of the design of the system, perhaps?
Well, I think it was a design of the system in the sense of regime survival and the ability to operate in case there was decapitation strikes or people were removed. But let's go back to the essence of the negotiations. What's complicated them is you ultimately are negotiating with people who then have to negotiate within their own system to see what they're allowed to give and what they're allowed to agree to. What is abundantly clear is that Iran is facing severe internal economic. All the problems Iran had before this conflict not only are still there, but they're worse. All the things that led to the protests, all of these are worse than they were before. And I think there's definitely elements within that regime that understand it. And then there are other elements of it that are more immune to it and perhaps more resistant to making agreements. And so what we are working through is in many cases, is delays in getting the responses to people. And this is why you see reporting about there might be a deal in the next few days, because internally it takes time to get responses from them, sometimes upward to 5 or 6 days.
Undoubtedly, they're using that to their advantage, sort of like the car dealer where the salesman has to go talk to his manager and make you wait and think about it for a while.
Even more complicated than that.
Even more complicated than that. One more question. I think we could benefit from hearing from you about the need to zero out funding for a couple of entities, including the National Endowment for Democracy and USADF. Can you tell us about that?
Well, look, these programs, I think, have served a purpose in the past, and obviously there's a congressional role to play here, right? I mean, at the end of the day, these programs have had, especially the National Endowment for Democracy, has had support in Congress in the past. And look, I was here for 16 years. I understand that you're going to pass an appropriations bill, and the appropriations bill is going to have things in it that we don't have in ours. That's just the way it is. And we understand it. We'll make it work. But we are concerned, or have been concerned in the past, about organizations that sort of have lost their purpose and what they're advancing. And at the end of the day, look, we have a lot of resources. The United States is the richest country in the world. We have the largest government budget in the world, but we don't have unlimited resources. We still have to be able to strategically spend our money. And the State Department, when I took over, a lot of people are like, oh, that's a mess. State Department's not that big. The majority of our employees are local hires overseas. We have, foreign service officers, career civil servants, but compared to some of these other agencies that are out there, we're not that large, and yet we have a global footprint. We're really, other than the department, I would say beyond the Department of War, we're the only ones that are present almost everywhere on the planet. So we have limited resources, and we have to be able to allocate those resources in ways that are driven by the core mission of advancing our national security. And oftentimes that will mean that things we have paid for in the past, we can't continue to fund. Because there are other things. It might be good, but there might be something else that's more important and even better. Other cases, we may still spend money on a purpose, but we want to be driven not just by, we don't want to be judged just by how much money we're spending on something. We also want outcomes for it. We want to show outcomes. That's been the goal behind these MOUs, these compacts with the 32 countries that we've entered into in a week plan, is we're not just trying to solve the disease problem this year. We're trying to build the local capacity so that 5 years from now, they won't need aid anymore because their local systems can handle it. I'm saying 5 years, some countries may take 10 years. But nonetheless, that's the goal, and it's been very well received.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Merkley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Secretary. Good to see you. As Senator Shaheen noted, you've expressed that no one died as a result of the sudden shutdown of AID. And I did ask you last time you were here about that, and I won't repeat all that, but I want to note that the folks who study this at the schools of public health, the Harvard Chen School, the Boston University School of Public Health, estimate that over 500,000 children have died from that sudden shutdown. I want to kind of put a note on that. If you were to walk across this country, you'd see one dead child equivalent every roughly 30 feet. That's the level of carnage. I know you disagree with that, but many experts who are in this field, that is their estimate. And I hope you'll ponder that as we strive to rebuild our programs related to malaria, tuberculosis, AIDS, HIV, nutrition, and certainly infectious diseases like Ebola. I wanted to turn, though, to Taiwan. It's an area that you and I worked on quite a bit together when you were here, including the Taiwan Relations Reinforcement Act and the Transnational Repression Policy Act, and the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office Certification Act. And I'm very concerned about the President's comments on his recent trip. He noted that arms sales to Taiwan are a, quote, very good negotiating chip. And when he was asked about how much he talked about arms sales with China, he said, we discussed arms sales, quote, in great detail. The 6 assurances included that arms sales to Taiwan would never be a negotiating chip. My concern is that the President now has kind of accentuated the arms sales by not approving, not putting the stamp of approval and completing the arms sale that Congress has already funded. That this sets a stage for China to very much proceed to pursue more aggressively their effort to incorporate Taiwan into the broader framework of China, including extinguishing Taiwan's democracy. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts. Hopefully there's a path here that will re-accentuate our support for Taiwan's democracy.
Thank you. That's an important question. So let me first say on Taiwan, and I think I made this point myself, either on the trip in China or thereafter when we returned. There's been no change to U.S. policy towards Taiwan. I think there's, obviously the Chinese side would like to see a change in the verbiage, but no change has been made in that regard. The second point I would make is, I believe in December, I know in December of this year, we did approve an arms sales, I think $11 billion. I think it's the single largest arms sale ever. It was a huge sale to Taiwan. This was just last December. I think it's more than the totality of the 4 years under the Biden administration. And I would recall that there were a 6-year period of time under the Obama administration where there were no sales to Taiwan. There is a second pending sale, which I think is the one you're referring to. It's the $14 billion one, and that remains under review. And but we just did one in December. So I don't think it's, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but I don't think it's fair to say that the U.S. is not providing it. We just had a massive arms sales, and it was so big and so noticeable that the Chinese became very aggressive about it and some of the incursions they undertook as a result of it. And as I said, it was more in one sale than we did in the entirety of the Biden administration, if I'm correct, and I think I am on that point. So, but the most important thing to understand is we want to see the status quo preserved as is at this moment. That's our policy. That's what we've said. That's what we continue to say. It's a very, as you know, a very delicate relationship to balance. But our policy on Taiwan has not changed, and it did not change on this trip.
Another issue that you and I worked on was the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. And it's really been the most effective strategy for saying that products produced by slave labor will not be admitted into the United States. And we've turned down a lot of products from China, but then they're transshipped, often just into Canada. It would be a far more effective policy if Mexico, Canada, and Europe were to join us. Is that an objective you can pursue in your role?
It is, and as you said, it's an enforcement challenge. I think the initial enforcement was easier because it was more straightforward. I think the transshipment issue makes it harder because it requires more paperwork, more due diligence, and frankly, in many cases, some of it is obscured. But I want to make this point. There's clearly a humanitarian aspect to it. There's clearly a humane aspect to forced labor, which is horrifying. Separate but related, there's an economic aspect to it. It is also, unfair competition for our companies to have to compete against someone who has free labor, basically compelled and forced labor. So we've made the argument on two fronts. Not just is this immoral, but it is and horrific, but it's also an enormous economic disadvantage, not just for us, but for companies all over the world. As you can imagine, depending on the country, some are more willing to lean in on these issues than others. I think just yesterday, last week, the foreign minister of China was visiting Canada, and where they sort of announced, or at least put out the prospect of how Canada can export more to China next year. That was the carrot. What we don't know in those, and I'm not blaming Canada, I'm just saying in general, they do this all over the world. There's a stick associated with it. And I would imagine that China's I know that they put tremendous amount of pressures on countries around the world not to comply with restrictions like the ones we put. I agree. If we got Canada and Mexico to agree, given our current trade arrangements, it would make it far more effective. To date, we have not been successful at convincing them that they should do that because, among other things, I think they fear retribution. But we certainly will continue to raise it because we think it harms them.
Senator Barrasso.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, great to see you again. You opened by talking about American leadership and American interests. And later this month, the G7 is going to be meeting in France, and then next month, NATO. Just what are the priorities you're going to go into those meetings with?
G7?
G7 and NATO, yeah, coming up next month.
And the one point we've made is, and what's interesting is a lot of the
This is how I keep my joints happy.
Omega XL is a powerful natural supplement backed by 40 years of clinical research. Take control of your pain, like Cynthia Bailey.
My knees in particular started giving me pain issues all the way back to my modeling days, from just running through airports, photo shoots. After taking Omega XL, I really started to notice how less stiff I was, especially my knees and my hip. Has Omega XL changed my life? Yes. I barely notice my joint pain anymore. Now I'm like literally sprinting through the airports. My secret is Omega XL.
Pick up the phone and call now to get this exclusive TV offer. Buy one Omega XL and we'll send you a second bottle absolutely free. You'll also get a free bottle of Vitamin XL D3. Buy one, get two free. A total value of over $115, all for just $49.95. You save more than 55% and shipping is free. Backed by a money-back guarantee and is not available in stores. Operators are standing by, so call now.
Hi, my name is Brady. When I was born, my parents thought everything was okay. My mom and dad were so excited to take me home.
I still get goosebumps telling this story. Several days in, his skin started to become very cold and clammy. We noticed that he had become blue around his mouth, and something was just very off.
We packed up as fast as we could. Brady stopped breathing twice on the way to the pediatrician. And that was one of the #1 things that just haunts me to this day.
I was born with a congenital heart defect called aortic coarctation. If my parents waited just one more hour to drive me to the hospital, I would not be here today. But thanks to research funded by the American Heart Association, I had heart surgery that saved my life. But not every kid is as lucky as me, which is why we need your help. Just call the number on the screen or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help. Get people trained in CPR. Get more hospitals certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. And help fund the next medical breakthroughs to help save kids like me.
When you donate to the American Heart Association, you're helping save lives like my son. And now my son is happy and healthy thanks to the support of people like you.
When you call with your $19 a month, you'll get this really cool t-shirt as a thank you. Many children die from congenital heart defects. I can't wait to grow up to become a heart surgeon and fix babies' hearts, but until then, I'll keep helping the American Heart Association. So please join me. Just call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org to become a monthly donor and help save lives.
Global AI and semiconductor supply chains, and now the technology prosperity deal. I want to know how you've accomplished so much, and is this a model for U.S. relationships going forward with NATO?
Yeah, the interesting thing about Sweden is because they and Finland to this equal extent is because they were not members of NATO for many, many years. They had a self-sufficiency in their defenses. And so now that they've joined, they've actually added to the equation. I'm not here to beat up on any specific country, but generally speaking, the countries you added to NATO were countries that needed from NATO. Sweden and Finland have actually contributed because they brought their own defense industry, their own advanced technologies. So they've been a great partner. They've been an extraordinary partner. We were just there because we had the NATO foreign ministers meeting in Sweden, and it was phenomenal. And I think that Sweden is a great ally and a country that we're continuing to find a lot of synergy and cooperation with, especially on the field of technology, but also on defense. I mean, they have their own defense industrial base, which is an impressive defense industrial base. I wish every country in NATO had what they have, but I understand why Sweden has it.
In number of travels that a number of members have done in bipartisan ways, we found out as we go around Europe that most countries will say they've been too dependent on the United States for military, too dependent on Russia for energy, and too dependent on China for materials. This administration has really made these nations step up to do what they need to do in terms of putting the money forward in defense. So I want to know what the next concrete steps we can do in terms of making some of the pledges of moving from 2% to 5%, making sure that they deploy the military capabilities.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, some countries are on track to do that, others are not. Let me just speak about it in general terms. There's a real challenge. On the one hand, they've made these pledges that they're going to increase their defense spending and their defense capability. It actually has to be on defense. That's the first thing. You can't say that pensions for former soldiers and sailors is part of your 5% or your 3.5. I mean, that can't happen. But the bigger challenge that much of Europe faces, many countries in NATO faces, their economies are not growing, and in order to spend more money on defense, they're going to either have to raise taxes or cut social programs. And part of the reality of NATO, whether we like to hear it or not, is that many of the countries in Europe were able to build these very robust social safety nets because they didn't have to spend it on defense because NATO and the United States were providing it for it. So they're going to have to deal with that reality. The second point is, and this is not an anti-NATO statement, but it is the reality. The United States has global obligations. At the same time as I'm in NATO, I have to speak to the Indo-Pacific countries who are also worried about what's our force posture they're going to be. We obviously are involved in the Middle East. We have counterterrorism issues with regards to Africa. We have growing mill-to-mill cooperation in our own Western Hemisphere, especially taking on these transnational terrorist organizations and the like. So we don't have like unlimited military resources, even though we have a very large budget. They're not unlimited. And so we have to be able to allocate our resources and our personnel in ways that make sense, and it has to come at the expense of something. And so I think that's the reality that we have shared with our NATO partners from the very beginning of this administration and have been consulting every step along the way. But these countries will have to step up. They, at a minimum, have to be able to conventionally defend their own sovereign national territory for the most part.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Van Hollen, you're next.
Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Secretary. This is your first public hearing since President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu launched an illegal war against Iran. Netanyahu said he's been waiting 40 years to do this. Turns out he finally found a president who was both stupid and reckless enough to join him. The war has killed 14 American service members, wounded hundreds more, and killed thousands of civilians. It's driving up the price of gas, food, and much more. Trump obviously doesn't care. He called high gas prices peanuts and said, "I don't think about Americans' financial situation." That's from the President of the United States. And all for what? The President told us 91 days ago that we had, quote, won the war in Iran. Last year, he told the country, Iran's key enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Was that false? Let's face it, Mr. Secretary, the Trump foreign policy has become a dumpster fire. This is the same president who's more interested in flattering Vladimir Putin than in protecting Ukrainian sovereignty. The president who lifted restrictions on the transfer of sophisticated U.S. chips to China, but came back from his trip there with nothing but ballroom envy. He tweeted about that the other day. This is the president who brought on Elon Musk to take a chainsaw to AID, which has enabled the current Ebola outbreak in the DRC. We've also witnessed corrupt crypto deals with the UAE royal family that have enriched the Trump family at the expense of our national security. We've seen an administration engage in extrajudicial killings in the Caribbean, hijack Venezuelan oil, threaten to invade Greenland, and weaken the NATO alliance. Here at home, a Reagan-appointed judge said that you and former Secretary Noem abused your powers when you locked up and still seek to deport students for protesting the destruction of Gaza. The Reagan-appointed judge said you did that, quote, primarily on account of their First Amendment-protected political speech. Speaking of Gaza, the so-called Board of Peace seems to have run aground. Meanwhile, while Senator Rubio once proclaimed that the U.S. must, quote, work to ensure that refugees who flee war, torture, and persecution are provided safe environments to live and thrive in, now as Secretary of State in this administration, you have capped refugees at a record low of 17,500, and white South Africans, Afrikaners, have comprised roughly 99% of those slots, Mr. Secretary, a race-based refugee system. At the same time, the president's preventing Cuban political refugees from entering the United States, even as you've imposed a near oil blockade on that repressive regime. The stated goal is to change the government there, but the only real change is humanitarian crisis inflicted on millions of people, not members of the regime. And in that regard, Mr. Secretary, I have a question for you regarding the designation of Cuba as a state sponsor of terrorism. On the very first week, at least, of this administration, the administration reinstated that. And in a recent January 26 EO, you made statements suggesting connections to Hezbollah and Hamas. The previous administration did a thorough review with the intelligence community and concluded that there was no evidence that Cuba was engaged in ongoing state sponsor of terrorism. Did you find new evidence to support that conclusion?
Well, first of all, let me just say that's your question, but you made this long statement of which I disagree with most of it. We won't have time to address every point that you made. So let's stick to Cuba specific, because that's the question that you asked. Cuba has sponsored terrorism, and it's supported groups. For example, virtually every left-wing, radical, violent terrorist group in the Western Hemisphere has at some point relied on support from Cuba. The ELN, the FARC dissidents, including them, have been involved there. We also know, for example, that Cuba continues to host a pretty substantial collection intelligence sites on behalf of the Chinese and the Russians. But you look at the region and you look at all of these leftist Marxist terrorist organizations, all of them, in many cases, got their seed money from the Cubans.
If I can move on. I noticed you did not answer my question, because my question specifically related to whether there was new evidence to support that conclusion. I can just tell you—
Why would I need new evidence?
Because you're claiming that they're a state-sponsored terrorism, suggesting they're ongoingly involved in that. My final question to you, Mr. Secretary, relates to the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex. There have been reports that the United States is working with Israel to take away the Kingdom of Jordan's custodianship over the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex in East Jerusalem. Can you confirm today that there's no truth?
I'm not even aware of those reports.
There are reports, so I was hoping you could confirm.
Is that like a media report, or?
There have been several media reports.
Ah, well, you know the media is always accurate.
No, they're not, and that's why I'm getting—
Yeah, no, I've never even heard that. That's the first time I even hear anybody discuss that.
All right, well, I'm glad to hear that, Mr. Secretary.
But we have a great relationship with Jordan, and we're very helpful. I've just never heard that before. You should— I don't know what article you're referring to. Just give it to me. I'll look at it.
I'm happy to.
Is it a credible website?
I'm glad to hear you say, Mr. Secretary, there's no truth.
I've never heard that discussed by anybody.
Thank you much. Senator Paul, you're up next. Oops, I'm sorry. Senator Daines was here earlier. I apologize, Senator. Right. Senator Daines.
Chairman, thank you. Ranking Member Shaheen, good to see you as well. One of the underreported successes for your diplomacy and this administration is what's happened in terms of the peace agreement, a landmark agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I know, Mr. Secretary, you just were in the region most recently. A major step forward for a region long beset by conflict, nearly 40 years of a hot war. And through your leadership and President Trump's leadership, you've brought true peace to an area of the world sandwiched in between Russia and Iran. It was creative thinking that led to the establishment of the Trump route for international peace and prosperity as a solution to some of the stickier issues in that negotiation. The program promises to be a boon, not only for Armenia and Azerbaijan, but also many neighboring countries. As Brzezinski once said, talking on the global chessboard, his book, that Central Asia is the wine bottle and Azerbaijan's the cork. You uncork the wine bottle, suddenly you've got oil and gas and critical minerals flowing back towards the West instead of to Russia, to China, and to Iran. Mr. Secretary, can you tell us a little bit about how you plan to implement the TRIP framework agreements and deliver major economic benefit to both the United States in a very historically troubled region?
Thanks. Actually, as you said, I was there last week. What was it, Tuesday maybe? We signed the TRIP agreement between the U.S. and Armenia, and this is, you described it as a corridor, which I know it's the anchor of a peace agreement with Armenia and Azerbaijan, and that's critical, but it's much more than just the anchor of a peace agreement. It really has the opportunity to revolutionize Armenia's strategic location and become a central hub for trade in the region. It solves the issue of access that Azerbaijan cared about, and it was an irritant in their relationship, but it does much more than that. It has the ability to transform the Armenian economy in a very powerful way. Here's the other thing that it's done. For a long period of time, our relations with Armenia were quite stagnant, and in many cases, I would argue, almost non-existent. It has also reinvigorated that relationship between our two countries and allow us to explore opportunities in all sorts of other fields. So we're involved in that very heavily now. We literally just signed the agreement, and it will allow us to drive and hopefully incentivize U.S. private sector investment in this corridor to the benefit of American companies and American interests, but also to the benefit of Armenia, Azerbaijan, and other regional countries. I would also argue, by the way, and just to point out, and I don't mean this again, I think this is pretty well understood in the open source reporting, the Russians are less than happy about our engagement there. I think there's evidence that they would like the current president to lose his election as a result of this growing relationship with the United States. To be clear, we're not there to infringe on Armenian sovereignty. We're not asking them not to be friends with other countries. We just want to be able to have a relationship with them that's built not just on peace. Peace is important, but that's just the beginning. It's the economic opportunities that it provides. There are American companies and American workers that will benefit from it, but the Armenian people will be the ultimate beneficiaries of this corridor opening.
Just remarkable, and we were there together, in fact, last August at the White House when President Aliyev of Azerbaijan, Prime Minister Pashinyan of Armenia came to sign that agreement with President Trump's leadership. To think a Shiite Muslim country, Azerbaijan, and Armenia, one of the oldest Christian countries in the world, came together to sign a peace agreement was truly a breakthrough. And so it's an underreported story, in my opinion, Mr. Secretary. I think we need to get the story out. This is a critical geopolitical problem that has been definitely remedied by the leadership of this administration.
Yeah, I mean, the key, Senator Daines, is going to be execution. Like, you can sign an agreement, you can have the things in place. We now have to make sure we are focused on driving it and ensuring that to the extent American companies can contribute to the infrastructure, to the railway, to the highway, to everything that needs to happen in order for that corridor to open, and then the spin-off effect of it as well. We don't need to dominate it. We're not asking for an American monopoly economic, but we do want our companies to get a fair shake in there. And by the way, partnering with Armenian companies in many cases, so it becomes mutually beneficial.
Secretary Rubio, before my time runs out, I want to bring up one very important final point. As you well know, I've been spending a lot of time over the past few years working with our friends in Central Asia, across the Caspian there, with the 5 Central Asian countries. Things are progressing well thanks to your engagement and encouragement and President Trump's. And we're seeing a lot of fruit from last year's C5+1 summit that was right here in Washington. That being said, there is still a major hurdle to strengthen our ties. One of the key irritants to our friends in Azerbaijan and in Central Asia is the infamous Jackson-Vanik trade restrictions. These are Soviet-era relic restrictions. In fact, Senator Murphy and I are the co-leads on the repeal. It's long past due that we get this changed. Mr. Secretary, is removing these restrictions a priority for you and your department? And removing them have a significant impact on our relations with Central Asia?
Yeah, it's a detriment. We'd like to see it removed. And I think you should talk to the chairman and the ranking member about putting it on the agenda with you guys. They're right there. You can tell them. But
it's finance.
Oh, it's finance. You don't have jurisdiction over that?
It is.
That's my job.
And Mr. Secretary.
Finance.
Well, that's good. That's what I do, too. It's not my job. It's,
And our encouragement from our friends over in the House will be helpful. We'll work with you on that, Mr. Secretary.
You should get it passed. I mean, look, it would be very helpful.
Yeah, it would be. Thank you.
Absolutely.
First of all, let me say that I absolutely concur with the Secretary and Senator Daines with you. And I've talked to the President about this, as you know. I have actually talked to the chairman of the Finance Committee, who I know relatively well. We actually have a plan for going forward. You and I are going to meet on that here pretty quickly.
I'm glad I have friends in high places, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
But no, you're absolutely right on that, and it's just in the queue. So with that, let us go to Senator Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, Mr. Secretary, National Security Advisor. Good to see you again. I know from our service here together that you agree that China is the greatest national security threat that we face. And one of the key reasons is their repeated threats to take control of Taiwan by force if necessary. And Taiwan, as we both know, is not just some faraway island. It produces 90% of the semiconductor chips critical to everything from F-35s to iPhones. And its geography makes it indispensable, both to global commerce and military power. Do you agree with that?
Taiwan? Yeah, it's not just strategically important in terms of where it's located. It also is the message that it sends to the world if something were to happen to it.
Agreed. That's why for decades, really with leadership from the Senate in a bipartisan way, we've provided arms to deter the PRC's potential military aggression. In fact, you introduced the Taiwan Peace Through Strength Act of 2023. In January, Congress pre-approved a $14 billion arms package for Taiwan. It's been 6 months. We haven't received a notification. Have you advised President Trump to proceed with this?
Yeah, it's under but I don't know if you were here a moment ago when I discussed. We just did $11 billion in December, which was, I think, the largest sale in history. It's certainly, I think it was more than the cumulative amount under the Biden administration. And I recall during 6 years of the Obama administration, there was zero gone to Taiwan. So some way you would argue that we're trying to make up ground.
So why hold off on it now?
Well, so the other 14 is being reviewed. It's under review. It hasn't been, I think it's been noticed, but it hasn't been reviewed. I mean, it hasn't been approved yet.
So
it's under review under the White House.
Mr. Secretary, my concern is that President Trump has said publicly that arms sales to Taipei are a great negotiating chip with China. And my concern at a time when the PRC has been far more aggressive than they were in previous years, centerline crossing, circumnavigation of Australia, aiding Iran and Russia in their war goals and aims, frankly, literally helping Iranians target U.S. service members. I respect the importance of our having an open negotiation and relationship with the PRC, but in the meetings you were in Beijing, did the president offer to condition arms sales to Taiwan in order to placate Xi Jinping?
Well, look, I'm not going to discuss what was the president's words in a meeting, and suffice it to say that, you know, that specific question you just asked, that's not the context in which the president has raised this in the past. When the president says it's a great negotiating thing, what he's really saying is it's because China, as you can imagine, always mentions this. Like, this is a top priority for them. They are constantly talking about Taiwan arms sales, but that in no way is what is holding up our decision-making or the White House's decision-making. It is something the president will have to decide on the timing of when and how that is executed on. It's been approved by Congress. It's been noticed. The money's available. And as I said, we are just coming off the heels of a very large sale in December of last year. So there are a variety of reasons why these things don't happen immediately.
Well, I'll just assert, Mr. Secretary, that there is more reason than ever for the administration with congressional support to continue providing robust military capacity to Taiwan, given that the PRC is more and more regionally aggressive. You also introduced and passed legislation in 23 prohibiting any president from unilaterally withdrawing from NATO. I assume this was because you recognize that our alliances are a key advantage against Russia, against China, against other adversaries. Do you still consider Article 5 an unconditional commitment?
Yeah, so let me address that holistically, if it's okay, because I think we have time to do it. First of all, you're right. I have, throughout my entire career in the Senate, and through much of my time now in this administration, been a supporter of NATO. I see its utility. The key, and I'm just being honest with you when we talk about this, one of the key arguments that I would always use on behalf of NATO is the fact that it allows us basing rights that we could use in a contingency operation in a time of conflict, in a time of need, that we just have had. So when you have countries in this alliance, because understand, at the end of the day, we are providing basically the defense backbone of an entire continent of rich countries. These are not poor countries. These are rich countries. And the utility of NATO for us is that it provides these basing rights. Now we are living in a world in which some of these countries, I point to Spain as an example, openly brag about how they've denied us the use of these bases. And so if the core rationale for us being in NATO, if what we get out of NATO is the ability to use bases, and then we have members of that alliance that are basically denying the use of those bases in a contingency, it calls into question the entire thing.
Forgive me, I have one more question I want to make sure we get to. Is it not true that some of the challenges in our NATO relations have only come after President Trump threatened to seize territory from a trusted and reliable and contributing partner?
Yeah, I don't think that's fair.
I think he publicly said both.
I know, but I don't
use tariffs to coerce Denmark into giving up Greenland.
Yeah, but just to tell you, look, if you go back and study the history of it, NATO tensions and debates within U.S. or whether we should be in NATO. In the 1970s, it was the reverse. It was the administration trying to stay in NATO and Congress trying to get us out.
Yes.
I happened to see a speech, they were playing it after he passed away on C-SPAN, Jesse Jackson at the 1988 Democratic Convention calling for the United States to get out of NATO.
I
these debates over NATO, you were at that?
As was Joe Biden.
Oh.
Joe Biden didn't support that position then, and I don't support that position.
But my point is that these debates about NATO have been ongoing for a long time.
There's about 1,100 vetted Afghan allies being held at Camp As-Salih in Qatar. And that includes 400 children and 150 family members of currently serving active duty U.S. service members. They've been stranded there for a year and a half. And there is talk of sending them either back to Afghanistan into the waiting arms of the Taliban or into war-torn and now Ebola-infected countries like the DRC. And these are people who they or their immediate family members served alongside U.S. soldiers at great risk. Can you commit to working with me and others in this body to support the relocation of these vetted individuals to the United States, especially those who are family members of currently serving U.S. soldiers?
Yeah, I can't. First of all, as you know, we're under an executive order now after the National Guard attack here, and so that happened last year. So we can't admit any Afghans at this point into the country. That said, you just pointed to them being sent back to Afghanistan. Our goal, we've worked on this, and we'll work with you on it, is we have talked to multiple countries. Now, I don't know of any single country that's going to take 1,000 people, but we've talked to multiple countries about taking several hundred of these people and allowing them to move to a safe location. As you know, we are operating under not just those restrictions, but broader restrictions about immigration into the United States after 25 million people entered this country illegally over a 4-year period leading up to this administration.
The president just
but I'll work with you to find the right places for them to go. We want that to happen.
The president just raised the refugee cap exclusively to allow Afrikaners into our country. I would welcome a chance to work with you to find safe third countries for these Afghans. And I frankly think we ought to be revisiting our refugee policy, because the refugees who've come into our country in the past are the most vetted and often the highest contributing. As you know, my childhood church hosted a South Vietnamese family, and seeing the 5 of them become great Americans, entrepreneurs, contributors. It is refugees from oppression overseas, whether from Cuba or Venezuela, Vietnam or Afghanistan, who have long contributed to the United States. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Senator Paul.
I'd like to revisit for a moment the boats that were blowing up in the Caribbean and the Pacific that referred to as drug boats. I think it's interesting that the 3 secret criteria we're using to blow up the boats doesn't include whether they have drugs on board. I would like to add that the statistics from the Coast Guard also say that when we interdict alleged drug boats in the historic way, the way we've always done it, about 1 in 4 don't have drugs. We make mistakes. We see something suspicious about the boat, we stop them, and they don't have drugs on board. I would also like to add that drugs is not a criteria for blowing up the boats that are called drug boats, but neither is arms. So in order to blow them up, we don't have to say that they're armed or have drugs. And I think a lot of people would have questions, which I still do. I am glad to hear today, though, that the administration and the negotiations are willing to trade sanctions relief for removal of enriched uranium. I've said for a long time and argued for a long time that sanctions in and of themselves rarely, if ever, are of any value. I've yet to see any Chinese behavior that's changed because of sanctions. I've yet to see any Russian behavior change because of sanctions. I've really yet to see any Iranian behavior change because of sanctions. However, sanctions do have some leverage and ability to exact change if you remove them. So the removal of sanctions might actually have some hope. So I support the administration in this. Now, there are many Republican critics who have been vocal on the airways recently saying, oh, no, we can never negotiate with them. These are terrible people. Well, you don't really negotiate with really friendly, good people. In a time of war, you're going to have to negotiate with an adversary. So I do commend and supportive of the idea of this. And the other thing is it's very verifiable. You don't have to wait for verification. You could say the trade sanctions end as soon as we get the 440 kilograms of enriched uranium. Now, it has to be dug, I guess, some of it from under a mountain of rubble, but at the same time be very verifiable. But what I would argue and what I would advise is that you really, why not offer everything? Offer all of the relief of virtually all of the sanctions if you get it. Now, you can wait if that's what you want, is the enriched uranium out and a promise. Now, the rabid hawks will argue, well, we're not going to negotiate with terrorists. We're not going to negotiate with bad people. Then they'll continue to have enriched uranium, and they'll continue to enrich uranium. So I do think that the argument that there hasn't been a military solution to this is largely proven by the fact that even though we've militarily obliterated their military, all of that is true. It's as Fred Ickley wrote in Every War Must End, that military victory doesn't always translate or lead to political resolution or to things that you want done. What we really want done is no more enriched uranium, and you don't enrich uranium, you give up on these hopes. But I would say that as we are looking at trading sanctions, you say there's some you can do on your own, there's some that are congressional. I would be bringing in the leaders in the Congress who can give up on these sanctions and hopefully try to get their voice saying yes, if they will give up. Because if you give up a few piddling ones that that won't change things, that the White House has the ability to do, and you still have all these congressional sanctions, if you're on the other side of that equation, you might say, we're not giving up the one thing we think is leverage, the enriched uranium, for maybe a little bit of sanctions relief. So I would say really go all in on it, because it would be verifiable. You don't have to wait and prove it. You would have to prove in the future whether they're enriching. But I think that is a good step forward. But it's also important for people to have a discussion of what diplomacy is, and that diplomacy doesn't always have a bad name. And frankly, I'm glad to hear that the administration is negotiating, and I wish you luck. And I'd love to hear your response in general.
Well, first of all, the president's made clear the priority is Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. And what do they need to have a nuclear weapon? They need a couple things. They need the ability to enrich. That has been substantially destroyed, but could always be rebuilt over time. And the second is the ability, and highly enriched uranium, that's 60%, that could quickly be enriched to 90% weapons grade. The second point you make is about sanctions. So that's the goal here. And the sanctions, first of all, there's a combination of sanctions. There's sanctions that block direct sort of activities that generate revenue. And that's problematic beyond the nuclear program, because they also use this revenue to fund sponsors, to sponsor terrorism like Hezbollah and others around the region. And then there's the frozen assets, which are related to sanctions, but these are Iranian assets that have been frozen that they don't have access to. So what I would argue, and again, I don't want to get ahead of myself because we're not engaged in this conversation with them yet, but if you get into a situation in which the reason why there are sanctions are because the nuclear program, and so if they comply with what we're demanding on the nuclear side of it, zero enrichment, get rid of the enriched uranium, they're complying with these things, then I think that's the place where the frozen assets could be discussed. The more they give, the more they would get. I think ultimately we will still face other challenges related to Iran separate from the nuclear program, like what they use their money on, which is to sponsor Hezbollah and to sponsor Hamas and to sponsor terrorism around the world. But on the nuclear question, which was the president's been focused on now, no nuclear weapon program, the sanctions that are directly related to the nuclear program, the more they give, theoretically, the more they should be willing to get. What they're not going to get it as a down payment. They're not going to get it as a signing bonus. And I would also point out that negotiations on nuclear matters are highly complex, highly technical. And so it will take some time to work through that, as is sanctions, by the way, highly technical and in many cases multifaceted. There are UN sanctions, there are US sanctions, there are US congressional sanctions. So there's a lot to unravel there.
Is benefit from the idea of trading sanctions relief for activity. And if you don't ever trade them, if you just have them on the book, then I think they're of little value in changing behavior. Thank you.
Senator Booker.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary, you and I talked a lot about Africa, and I raised concerns about a lot of the cuts. We're seeing globally an increase in tuberculosis, an increase in malaria cases. We see a continued ongoing on the continent HIV crisis. And the United States has pulled back from a lot of its investments in those areas. Now with the crisis with Ebola, we see that the challenges that have been brought about as a result of our surveillance, early detection, and the like. So I'm just very concerned about what the administration's strategy is, because we're clearly seeing here that what goes on the continent of Africa directly affects our public health as well.
Well, first of all, I don't agree with that assessment. I mean, first of all, it's not about cutting back. The response here is not just how much money you spend, it's what results you're going to get. Now, let's talk about Ebola for a second. Ebola, the outbreak in Ebola was in a war-torn, isolated rural area in the DRC. That's where that began. Since that time, our response has been very quick, very rapid.
Well, so you're saying you did not cut early detection periods. I'm not talking
I'm
about
saying that whatever you're pointing to as the cut is not the reason why there was an Ebola outbreak.
I'm not connecting the two. I'm simply saying.
Well, you are connecting them. You said that our cuts...
Senator Rubio, I'm not trying to get in an argument with you. I would really like to actually have my questions answered. So very quickly, we cut early detection when it comes to infectious diseases on the continent. Factually, this is not an opinion. We made those cuts. We cut early warning systems on the continent.
It had nothing to do with the Ebola outbreak.
So I don't need to tell you, Secretary Rubio, that we're living in a place where an infectious disease crisis anywhere is a threat to public health everywhere. The United States has made major reductions in these areas that have put us more at risk. If you're talking about this clearly Ebola crisis, there's other things and other cuts we've made, and you see it factually. Even our own State Department personnel that I've talked to are saying we're less prepared for a global outbreak than we were before. And my worry is, specifically in a budget hearing, is this budget makes even deeper cuts into the kind of things that could prevent the next outbreak, or, as we've seen unfortunately with COVID, have us more prepared.
Yeah, I don't agree with that assessment. I don't know who told you that at the State Department.
So
just
let's
as an
move on.
example,
My time is limited.
I know, but that's an important question. I don't want to eat up your time, but
No,
I need to answer that because I just don't agree with that.
Mr. Secretary, you can't even agree on the facts.
Because that's not accurate. I mean, again, you look at what we've entered into with these
It's not accurate that we cut early detection.
Because those have all been repurposed and different arrangements that we now have with these countries. As an example,
I would like, for the record, because we're not going to cover it in my short time, if you're telling me we are as prepared or more prepared before the Trump administration came in, I'd like to see the facts.
I think when these reforms are finalized, which we're on the verge of doing, we're actually going to be better prepared. We are responding today faster, not just to humanitarian crisis, but to outbreaks than we were before. We are responding in some cases within 72 hours, are able to move funds to task, which you weren't able to do in the old system. And we're also building the capacity of these nation states through these compacts.
May I please reclaim my time to shift gears? The Strait of Hormuz, I was listening to the conversations you had with some of my colleagues. We've now seen the Strait close for months, and you explained that we're going to see an opening of the Strait, and ultimately the exchange we will get for that is, after that fact, we will release certain sanctions. Is that correct?
No, that's not what I said. What I said was that if they open the Straits, we will lift our blockade. The Straits and the blockade are what are interrelated.
And so for the nuclear program, in exchange for getting rid of the fissile material out of country, I imagine, is what the highly enriched uranium, we would release sanctions. Is that correct?
Well, it's not just that. It's also their enrichment activity. They would have to, they would have to make very severe and significant concessions on what they intend to enrich in the future.
And already with the March relaxing of sanctions, allowing Iranians to sell oil to the Chinese, estimates have been between $10 and $50 billion they got from that relaxing of sanctions. How much money might we see in a deal in our relaxings of sanctions in order to get rid of the highly enriched uranium and stop their enrichment?
Well, let me just tell you on that portion. The sanctions that were released on Iran were boats on the water. And so that oil was already out in the marketplace. It was sold at market rates, but the sanctions covered, and to the extent we've been able to enforce them, we have the revenues of those sales. So yeah, the Iranian oil was unsanctioned so that it could be sold, but the revenue would have to flow back to blocked accounts, which our sanctions were able to go after. We've also seized, I believe, 6 vessels in the Indo-Pacific that involved Iranian sanctioned oil on top of it. So that wasn't necessarily a trade. They didn't get $50 billion directly as a result of. They might have gotten some of it. They certainly didn't get the majority of it. They are now losing hundreds of millions of dollars a day in revenue because of the blockade. And the blockade exists because of what they're doing in the Straits.
Right, and I guess the conclusion I have, and my time's expired, is that the Strait of Hormuz was open before this unjustified war. We're now scrambling to try to find a way to get it back opened again. Not only is it causing economic havoc to our country and to residents all around this nation, families trying to make ends meet, but you see on top of that, the Iranians finding ways to leverage that, as we allowed them to do with the Chinese for tens of billions of dollars. And so my point is, before we even get to a nuclear negotiation, this regime is getting money to rebuild, purchase more drones, cause more havoc. And this is before we're even trying to get back to a
But
point where
I apologize. I don't understand how they're getting this. What revenue are you referring to?
Well, there's two sources of revenue we're seeing. One is the revenue from the Chinese, that's factually documented. And number two, the revenue that you're proposing that they should receive by releasing all of their highly enriched uranium, as well as in making a commitment about their enrichment capacities.
Okay, yeah.
Hold on. And that was the exact deal that you guys vilified, that the president and you vilified President Obama from having.
Yeah. No,
So
I don't
here we
think those
have
are
a
not the
worse situation where
Those are not the same
our
deals.
adversary and our enemy, who's causing havoc in the region, who is funding proxies and terrorists, has discovered, thanks to you all, the power of shutting down the Strait of Hormuz.
No, they didn't
which
discover.
is
They
all-
knew that a long time ago, and they've done it before.
Clearly, we all knew that a long time ago. That's why this
And they intended to do this at
ill-conceived
some point
war
in the
should have
future
never
as well.
happened.
Yeah, but
You have made our adversary in a stronger negotiating position. We are the strongest nation on the planet Earth, and we're in a stalemate with Iran. And now we're begging to get back into a deal that you all
We're not
trashed in
begging.
the first place.
There's no one begging. I don't know.
Clearly, this is a
Senator
shame.
Booker, your time's up.
But can
Senator
I just-
Rubio, since he's
I do
gone
want to
over, you
address
can
some of these points
respond.
because they go to the heart of the matter. No one's begging for anything here. The Iranians might be begging because their economy's losing hundreds of millions of dollars a day. That they are losing. Understand, Iran had street protests going on before all of this started. All of those factors, economic factors in Iran, are far worse today than they were 6 months ago when those protests were happening. They have hyperinflation. Their currency's completely devalued. They're struggling to make payroll for their government workers. Iran is in a very serious situation. And if it was up to the political class there, and I understand everybody there is sort of radical in some way, but if it was up to the people that actually like go to elections and wear the suits and you see on TV, they'd probably make a deal tomorrow. It's the issue they're facing is that the supreme leader and the IRGC Corps are a little bit more immune from those pressures until they can be convinced otherwise. And I think that's the direction that they're moving in, because the reality, I don't know where you're getting this perception that Iran is stronger. Iran has no navy left. They've lost a substantial percentage of their defense industrial base. That Iran has lost a substantial percentage of their missile launchers. And their economy is far worse today, and I mean far worse today, than it was 6 to 9 months ago. And they are looking at hundreds of billions of dollars of reconstruction costs just to get to where they were 6 months
Mr. Rubio, you keep telling us how we're winning this war. The president keeps saying,
well, the war's over
completely
now.
annihilated. The war is not over. And yet the American people see how we're losing at the pump and with their costs, and yet this thing still hasn't been resolved. Every day he tweets out, oh, we've obliterated them, we've annihilated them, they're going to surrender. But yet we still find ourselves spending billions of dollars a week
Senator
on
Booker,
a war abroad.
you've gone way over. And
It would be nice if we had hearings where people
Thank
had to
you,
be held
Senator
accountable.
Booker. Senator Scott.
All right. Secretary Rubio, so first off, do you think it's important to Americans that the Iranian regime doesn't have nuclear weapons and ability to destroy?
I think it's important to the world.
Yeah.
The whole world. I mean, this question about the Straits is a great example. Imagine, the Straits gives them leverage. Imagine what nuclear weapons would give them leverage to do. At that point, they wouldn't even have to announce that we're controlling this. They would just say, we control the Straits. There's nothing you can do about it because our nuclear weapon will allow us to do it. You will have to pay us a toll for using an international waterway from now on, and you can't do anything to us militarily because we'll blow you up with a nuclear weapon. That is the leverage that they were trying to build. If they ever got a nuclear weapon, not only would they have a nuclear weapon, not only would they control the Straits, they would be able to act with impunity because you wouldn't be able to touch them. You wouldn't be able to do anything about them.
I want to thank you for what you're doing. Let's talk about Latin America, which is, as you know, important to a lot of people in our state. So thanks for what you've done with both Venezuela and Cuba. Let's do Venezuela first. I think every Venezuelan I know is appreciative of what happened with Maduro. And I know you have a three-step process to get to democracy there. Can you talk about where you are? I mean, I know you're about to try to get Delcy Rodriguez to do the right thing. We still, unfortunately, have political prisoners not released. We still have oppression. So can you just talk about the process you're going through?
Well, first of all, I remind everybody, what's today, the 2nd? So it's literally been 5 months.
Right.
Like, I know it seems like it was 10 years ago, but it's been 5 months. And I think Venezuela is in a better place today and in a better trajectory today than it was 5 months ago. Now, is it where it needs to be? Is it where it needs to ultimately wind up? The answer is, of course, no. Ultimately, in order to truly transition, they have to have multi-party, free and fair elections. But the conditions for free and fair elections are the following. First of all, you have to have a free and open media. And while you've seen independent journalists are now, for the first time, activated again, that has to exist. Political parties have to be given the space and time to organize. The National Electoral Council has to be reformed so that it has members in it that will actually accurately count the vote. You have to have certain conditions in place. I'm not telling you that's 5 years from now, but it's been 5 months, so I want to be relative to that. Here's what I can tell you. For the first time, certainly, since whenever, in the pre-Chavez era, maybe ever, and certainly since the post-Chavez era, the oil wealth of the country is not being stolen. The oil wealth of the country is going directly to pay government workers, buy medical equipment, audited by KPMG. That's a significant advance. That's not a permanent situation, but that's a very valuable one today. You have seen reforms. You have seen, for example, the infamous prison, El Acoide. It's been closed. You still have about 400 and something, what we determined to believe to be political prisoners, but you've had many others that have been released, including many high-profile ones. You've seen a reform, a systemic reform in individuals involved in their government, replaced by new people. Some we don't know well, others we know a little bit about, but certainly better than the people whose place they took before. You've seen a level of cooperation on a couple of topics that I actually can't even discuss in a setting like this, but be more than happy to talk to you about, any of you about, in the appropriate setting. And I think that's been a positive. By the way, you've seen the retrieval. The United States, with the full cooperation of the Venezuelans, went in and retrieved highly enriched uranium. They had highly enriched uranium in their country because of an old reactor program, not because of nuclear weapons or anything, and they wanted it out of their country. And we were able to go in and actually retrieve it along with the UK mission that went in with us and get it. We have a functioning embassy, and we have direct flights for the first time. Venezuelans are now able to go back, not just visit relatives, but begin to engage in the economic life of the country. All of that is to say, it's been 5 months. There is a lot more to go. This is not the direction we want Venezuela to be. But what I will say is that the Venezuela that's there now, under the interim authorities, does not pose the threat to the United States that it posed 5 months ago, when it was an open base of operation for Iranian operatives, for Cuban intelligence, and for others who used it as a base of operation against the national interest. But we have a lot of work to do. We are nowhere near where we want to get to there.
Can you give the same thing about Cuba?
Cuba's a very different thing. Yeah. I think the misnomer about Cuba, or the misunderstanding about Cuba's actually not controlled by the government. Cuba's controlled by a military holding company named Gaesa. And Gaesa virtually owns anything. They own the tourist sector, they own mining, they own the gas stations, they own everything. They generate about 70% of Cuba's GDP is under the control of this military company. And they're sitting on between $14 and $17 billion in assets. So you have people literally starving, people literally like power grid that hasn't been maintained in 10 years. And yet you have this holding military company sitting on these assets. And by the way, not a penny of the money in the military holding company translates over to the public treasury. So the fundamental challenge we have here is that Cuba needs to be, in order for it not to continue to be a failed state, which poses a threat to the United States, they need systemic and serious reform. They need to have economic reforms. And the question is, can they possibly reform, given the people who are currently in charge, both of Gaesa and of their government? And I think the answer is they can. I really don't believe this system is capable of reform unless new people take over or a new mindset takes hold. Now, we've engaged in conversations with them. We've offered them what I think needs to happen in order for their economy to recover. And that's the last point I would make, is I think somebody raised this issue of a oil blockade. Cuba was having blackouts well before January 3rd of this year. They were having blackouts for years. And they were having blackouts for two reasons. Number one, no one will give you free oil except Maduro. That's what's changed here. What's changed here is they're no longer getting free oil from Venezuela. And number two, the main reason why they have energy blackouts is because they didn't invest a single dollar back into their plants, back into improving their plants. And they could have bought this equipment from any company in the world, but they didn't invest in it. Instead, they invested it to build tourist hotels that now sit empty because there's no tourism into Cuba. So Cuba's a little bit more complicated than Venezuela, but it's a mess.
Thanks for what you're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Rubio, I trust you're familiar with then CENTCOM Commander and future Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis's famous quote about the importance of funding our foreign policy apparatus. In 2013, in response to a question from the now chairman of SASC, General Mattis pointed out that if you don't find, and I quote him, if you don't fund the State Department fully, then I need to buy more ammunition ultimately, end quote. Unfortunately, despite his service in the first Trump administration, the second time around, you seem to have taken the message as a blueprint rather than as a warning. The budget that you're presenting today cuts the State Department by about a third, after you previously tried to enact steep cuts and eliminations last year, many of which were already rebuked by Congress on a bipartisan basis. Time and again, this administration uses our military as a first tool of choice, manufacturing new crises and new conflicts that worsen the situation for folks abroad as well as for American people back here at home. And now you're here to justify a budget request that further undermines our diplomatic apparatus, the tools and professionals that are critical for not only preventing crises before they begin, but those who will be responsible for negotiating our way out of Trump's war of choice in Iran and whatever other nightmares he dreams up with. So based on how this administration has conducted itself for the last year, our adversaries are learning that the United States is not a reliable negotiator. They're learning that we will quickly turn to using force before working to alleviate crisis points and prevent war. I'm very concerned that that in turn increases the risk of our adversaries jumping to use force first, increasing risk to American citizens and American interests around the world. We saw that instinct for the military option in the Caribbean and in Venezuela. And now we're seeing threats of it in Cuba while we're still engaged in the Middle East, where President Trump is blowing a shocking amount of money and failing to uphold his solemn duty to put our service members at risk only for the most serious and imminent national security threats to American people. Mr. Secretary, you also wear the hat of a national security advisor. So with both that hat and as Secretary of State, do you agree that this administration has spent more on Trump's war in Iran than you are requesting today for this entire State Department budget request?
Yeah, I can't speak to the Department of War. Would have to speak to you about the money and what they calculate are the costs. I can't give you an accurate answer on that because that's not the thing that I look at.
I would think you would have some insight because you are our national security.
Well, I've seen the testimony that Secretary Hegseth and others have conducted in front of their oversight committees, but I just can't. I don't want to give you an answer that's not accurate.
Okay.
So.
Well, this week, let me put out some numbers that I have. This week, the cost of President Trump's illegal war of choice against Iran are likely to balloon past $35 billion by the rate from DOD's own May calculations, and surpass your FY 2027 budget request of $35.1 billion for the State Department and related programs. That's an astonishing figure, worth repeating. In just 14 weeks, President Trump will have blown through as much, if not more money in Iran than he thinks Congress should spend on U.S. diplomacy for the entirety of the next fiscal year. This administration's distorted priorities have unfortunately revealed some stark lessons for our allies and partners as well. The United States' use of force first will make them less secure as they'll be caught in the crossfire, left scrambling to protect themselves and their people. Mr. Secretary, do you agree that under Operation Epic Fury, our allies and partners in the region have expressed concern about their security and the threats that followed from this administration's uncoordinated actions?
No, I think our allies in the region have been very cooperative, some obviously very aggressively cooperative, like the UAE as an example. Kuwait's been fantastic. Obviously, no country likes to have their oil and their energy infrastructure hit, but I think it's a reminder to them of the threat that Iran poses. And the one lesson when this is all said and done is it's reminded them of, despite all the friendly talk that you've seen in the past, how dangerous Iran is to their own interests, how the billions of dollars Iran has spent, despite sanctions. Iran found the money to build drones and rockets. Okay. And luckily, we've taken a lot of them out, but they still have some, and they still have the ability to launch
My question is about our allies in the region expressing concerns, because, you see, public reporting in early May revealed that Saudi Arabia denied U.S. basing and overflight related to Trump's ill-conceived plan to escort ships through the Straits of Hormuz, and they're still not supportive of this risky tanker escort plan, and the Strait is still worse off today than it was before Trump initiated this war. And that doesn't even touch on the wider global lessons being learned by our allies and partners.
Yeah, we don't face any...
from the Shangri-La dialogue, where I heard from folks across the Indo-Pacific and especially in Southeast Asia, who are being hit hard by the same rising energy costs that are devastating American communities. And frankly, this administration insists on using military force as a first resort instead of a last resort, no matter the deadly cost of self-defeating impacts. Your budget request here would sadly perpetuate that trend and undermine the roles and responsibilities that you should be fulfilling as Secretary of State. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Okay, I didn't get to answer any of that.
I didn't ask you the question.
Well, she didn't answer my question. She doesn't want me to answer? Can I answer anyway?
I didn't ask him a question.
Okay. Well, but she made a bunch of points. I get to answer them, right? First of all, I don't understand this thing about let me tell you, we were just here, maybe you weren't here, we were just talking about it. We did a peace deal with Azerbaijan and Armenia. We just signed the trip agreement yesterday, actually, or last week we signed it. Last night I officialized it. That was diplomacy.
That's great, but the Trump administration has still blown through more money in 14 weeks
do I get to talk to
this entire budget that you're requesting.
Senator Duckworth, I'm going to let Senator Rubio reply to the statements that you made at his request.
Yeah, that's.
But we've got a hard stop at 12:30.
Okay, but I know, but you said a lot of stuff. I get to answer some of it. All right. So the first is the second is India-Pakistan. We ended that war. We were involved in helping broker that. Thailand, Cambodia. That's diplomacy. We've been very engaged in fact, as I sit here now speaking to you, I've got the Lebanese government and the Israeli government meeting at the State Department starting at 8:30 this morning for the 4th time after engaging last week at the military level. So we're carrying out now, we're carrying out diplomacy all over the world constantly and very successfully in many cases. Now, let me make one more point that you raised about the budget request. Guys, we understand how this process works, okay? You guys understand. I know because I've been involved all the time. We OMB, produces sort of timelines for every agency. We put forward a budget. We say, this is the money we've been allocated. This is how we would spend it. There is a congressional process, which I'm sure you're aware of. And in my time here, 16 years that I was here, I don't ever recall us once ever taking the president's budget and passing it into law. I'm not walking away from the budget. We can make it work if that's the budget you give us. But I have a sense, I have a suspicion, right, Senator Schatz, that we're going to have to work with you guys, that we're going to have to, well, you know, that we're going to have to work with you guys on a budget request that meets your priorities and ours. That's how it works. You guys are the appropriators. We have to work within we will tell you what we care about. We will tell you how we're going to spend the money. But ultimately, you will provide us a spending bill, and we will work through those parameters. But we have given you what we can live with. We can make it work. But if you want to, you know, if you're obviously going to have changes here in the Congress. But this stuff about diplomacy and the money spent on the war, diplomacy's always cost less money. We don't buy missiles. We don't buy rockets. We don't buy large airplanes and aircraft carriers. But we've been very effective. And I can give you list after list of places where we have had an impact in either de-escalating crisis before it started or ending active wars. And I'm very proud of the work that we've done in that regard, some of which haven't even been publicly discussed in some cases because they weren't high profile. And my last point. We remain heavily engaged in areas that may be not at the core of our national interests, but nonetheless are related to our national interests. You think about Sudan for a moment and the Quad. This has been a very frustrating situation to put together, but we helped convene a donor conference that got pledges for when that is resolved. We've put a lot of time and energy in a situation that right now, unfortunately, has turned into a proxy in the Middle East because of the UAE and the Saudis on opposite sides of it. In Libya, where our work in Libya now it's still divided, but they, for the first time ever, have a joint budget. For the first time ever, are cooperating on energy deals that are going to be beneficial to the people of Libya. So I just don't think it's fair to say we're not actively involved in diplomacy on last year's budget and spending, because we are, and we have been, and to great success.
Thank you. Senator Curtis.
There are real consequences to controlled media. And NTD's founders know them firsthand. Our freedom of thought is the price. This is the lesson that guides us in everything we do.
So there's the tear gas there.
We know the value of a free society. And we take seriously the responsibility to preserve it. We are NTD.
Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. President Trump saying a deal with Iran could come over the next week. What's behind the fresh tensions between Israel and Lebanon, and how President Trump is intervening. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Capitol Hill today as he testifies at back-to-back hearings for the first time since the Iran war began. President Trump says he's appointing William J. Pulte to serve as acting director of national intelligence while he continues his current roles, including leading federal housing finance and overseeing major mortgage institutions. Several primary races are taking place across the nation today, with 2 high-profile governor's races and several swing seats. The U.S. labor market is showing resilience and amid uncertainty. The latest report on job openings is beating expectations.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today's Tuesday, June 2nd. I'm Stephanie Cox. President Trump says a deal with Iran to extend the ceasefire could come soon. It comes as the Secretary of State explains how Iran is trying to take advantage of a delaying tactic. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent, Iris Tao. Good afternoon, Iris. What's the latest?
Good afternoon to you as well, Steph. So President Trump telling ABC in a new interview that he thinks an agreement with Iran on its nuclear ambitions to extend the ceasefire as well as reopen the Strait of Hormuz could come as early as over the next week. It comes as Secretary of State Marco Rubio is testifying before Congress today for the first time after the Iran conflict started. Rubio highlighting how Iran, of course, is still in the process of getting back to the U.S. on a potential peace agreement. He's also highlighting the fact that he thinks the war with Iran is over as Iran's military capabilities have been largely degraded. He highlighting that both conventional weapons shield and defense industrial base have been degraded, and that a U.S. blockade against Iran in the Strait of Hormuz is costing Iran hundreds of millions of dollars each day. On Iran's nuclear ambitions, Rubio, while noting the ongoing negotiation process, is saying that the current progress is already unprecedented. Watch.
There is the prospect before us, which could happen today, it could happen tomorrow, it could happen next week, that for the first time, certainly in my memory, they have agreed to negotiate aspects of their nuclear program that just a month ago, or just a year ago, they were refusing to even mention, much less enter into discussions about.
And late last week, President Trump saying that Iran has already agreed to no nuclear weapon. And after reviewing that agreement in the Situation Room for about 2 hours, according to White House officials, reports suggest that President Trump is now demanding stronger language on Iran's commitment on no nuclear weapon, as well as on its commitment to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And now, again, U.S. waiting for Iran to get back. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, during his testimony, saying that Iran's leadership remains highly fractured, and he also says there are some elements in that regime that understand what the U.S. is saying when it comes to these talks, but there are also elements that are more resistant to making agreements. Secretary saying that Iran is using this delaying tactic to its advantage. Watch.
What's complicated them is you ultimately are negotiating with people who then have to negotiate within their own system to see what they're allowed to give and what they're allowed to agree to. What is abundantly clear is that Iran is facing severe internal economic, and this is why you see reporting about there might be a deal in the next few days, because internally it takes time to get responses from them, sometimes upward to 5 or 6 days.
It all comes amid new clash between Israel and Lebanon-based Hezbollah. President Trump, telling reporter in ABC interview that he quickly turned around a little glitch and reaching a deal with Iran by brokering a truce between Israel and Hezbollah. President Trump announcing yesterday that he talked to both sides and ultimately both sides to agree to stop fighting. It comes, though, as Israel, while backing off from its threat to strike Beirut, still had new clashes with Hezbollah overnight. And now we know that a while ago, actually, Trump administration did negotiate a truce between Israel and Lebanon, and during which the Trump administration emphasized how Hezbollah, a militant group based in Lebanon, also backed by Iran to target Israel, is the common enemy of both Israel and Lebanon. Let's take a look.
Both are victimized by the same terrorist organization, a terrorist organization that no doubt has victimized Israel, but has also victimized the people.
But Lebanon was a great country. It was a beautiful country, smart people, very brilliant people, doctors, professors.
economists, some of the smartest people on the planet. But it got torn apart by different factions and nothing having to do with them, outside factors. So I think it can be brought back pretty quickly.
And today, the fourth round of talks between Lebanon and Israel are happening at the State Department in Washington, D.C., mediated by the U.S. And that is part of a larger peace plan for the region that the Trump administration is now pushing for. Back to you.
All right, thanks for that report, Iris Tao. President Trump, meanwhile, saying he's appointing William J. Pulte to serve as acting director of national intelligence while he continues in his current roles. The president saying Pulte will remain director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency and also continue as chairman of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. President Trump highlighted Pulte's experience managing sensitive matters and overseeing more than $10 trillion in markets tied to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. He noted that figure is up substantially from a year ago. President Trump says the appointment reflects confidence in Pulte's leadership across both housing finance and national intelligence responsibilities. Several primary state races are taking place across the nation today, notably in some key toss-up races. NTD's Melina Wisecup has that report.
The most watched race today will be the race for California's governor. The primary shaping up there is a nonpartisan primary, meaning only the top two performing candidates will make it to the November ballot. So we could see a situation where you have the top two Democrats on that ballot or two Republicans on the ballot in November. Now remember, this was also an area where there was a shakeup for the Democrat Party when Congressman Eric Swalwell left the race after those sexual misconduct allegations surfaced against him. Now on the Democrat side, you have the two leading candidates, former Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra and Tom Steyer. On the Republican side, the top candidate there is Steve Hilton, TV show host.
Everywhere you look, there's this sense that things aren't working and it's time for change. And that's why I think it's actually really important that I'm in the top two so that Californians have a choice.
President Trump doubling down on his endorsement for Steve in a post last evening, writing, "People are fleeing, crime is increasing, and taxes are high. Steve can turn it around." This type of messaging was also seen in the race for LA mayor. Here's what the Republican candidate in that race, Spencer Pratt, had to say.
We need change in LA. We can't do 4 more years of Karen Bass. There won't be in LA. We lose 50,000 people last year. Over 100 businesses closed. I meet with people now that have a lot of investment in LA. If Karen Bass were to get reelected, they're all leaving.
He's trying to make it to the November ballot to have a chance at unseating current Democrat Mayor Karen Bass, who's running for her second term.
We don't need a TV reality show villain, nor do we need a former councilwoman who has been in City Hall twice as long as I have and who is okay with tents in the street.
There are also several congressional races that I'm watching in California, like who will fill the seat of Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi in the 11th District, where she served for the past 40 years. Also, how powerful will Pelosi's endorsement be in this race? She's endorsed Connie Chan. There's also a pickup opportunity for Democrats in the 48th District. The Republican-held district was just redrawn to favor Democrats. There's also a governor's race shaping up in Iowa. 5 Republicans are vying to fill the seat of current Governor Kim Reynolds, who's leaving office. A late-night endorsement came from President Trump in this race as well. He endorsed Representative Randy Feenstra. Whichever Republican prevails in this race will face Democrat Rob Sand in November, who's running unopposed in his primary. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
And thanks to Melina for that report. Also in Iowa, Democrats are eyeing a pickup opportunity for a U.S. Senate seat. Republican Senator Joni Ernst's seat will need to be filled this November. Either Josh Churek or Zach Walz will become the Democrat tasked with flipping the seat from red to blue. Trump-backed Representative Ashley Hinson is dominating on the Republican side. Democrats are also eyeing a Senate seat in Montana. Republican Senator Steve Daines left the race late in the game, giving other Republicans little opportunity to register against former U.S. Attorney Kurt Alme. And New Jersey's 7th District is one of the 2 top targets for House Democrats. Republican Representative Tom Keene was endorsed by Trump. It's a toss-up district. Democrat Rebecca Bennett, a former Navy helicopter pilot, is favored to win the nomination. Coming up, Homeland Security says that some violent protesters outside an ICE facility in New Jersey were paid agitators. And Borders' our Tom Homan shares his experience touring the facility after allegations by Democratic lawmakers.
Shenyun Creations, the streaming platform from Shenyun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore shenyuncreations.com.
For the first time ever, we're bringing you MyPillow mattresses and mattress toppers for as low as $99.98. Remember, sleep's all about temperature and pressure points. Whatever sleep needs you have, we have the right technology for you. Like our MyPillow mattress topper, our queen size has over 10,000 individual comfort supports to help relieve your pressure points. And how about our 3-inch Hybrid Plus mattress topper? It's infused with copper and silver to help your body get the restorative sleep it needs. And our MyPillow and Case Coil mattresses, I personally helped develop these mattresses to make sure they have everything needed to give us great sleep. Plus, they're made right here in the USA, and they ship right to your front door absolutely free. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to get MyPillow mattresses and toppers for as low as $99.98 and free shipping.
Whispered across generations, a hidden secret unveils the essence of longevity and vitality, a timeless legend regarding energy and wonder. Rooted in ancient health wisdom, we proudly introduce Pure Tang Black Ginseng, a 100% natural organic energy drink made from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng. It takes 2,260 days and nights from seed to growth, undergoing a meticulous 9-step process of steaming and drying. Black ginseng reaches its full potency, enriched with ginsenoside RG3 and enhanced absorption efficiency. No sugar, no caffeine, no artificial ingredients. Experience the pure, natural power of Pure Tang Black Ginseng. Nourish your body, strengthen your immunity, and boost your energy. To order Pure Tang Black Ginseng, please visit puretang.com.
In the Design Studio by Mathis Home, when our suppliers offer us special discounts, we pass the savings on to you. Since we're one of the top Bernhardt dealers in the country, right now you can save an extra 20% off our everyday low prices line-wide. Even custom orders. Choose from the nation's largest in-stock selection of Bernhardt at the lowest prices. Plus enjoy complimentary delivery and design services. Don't miss your chance to save an extra 20% on Bernhardt at the Design Studio by Mathis Home.
Welcome back. The U.S. labor market looking resilient. The latest report from the Labor Department today is beating expectations. This despite economic uncertainty from the Iran war. U.S. employers posted 7.6 million job vacancies in April, up from 6.9 million in March. This is the closest since May 2024. Economists had forecast just 6.8 million openings. Layoffs fell, but so did the number of Americans quitting their jobs, a sign of confidence in their prospects. The American job market has been recovering from a sluggish 2025. Last year, employers added fewer than 10,000 jobs a month compared to 76,000 jobs a month this year from January through April. On Friday, the Labor Department will issue its closely watched jobs report for May. New Jersey officials are expanding police control outside Delaney Hall in Newark, with a half-mile perimeter now in place to keep rioters away. The Trump administration accusing some of the protesters of being organized agitators. Here's more.
A curfew is now in effect around Newark's Delaney Hall ICE Detention Center following violent protests. Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin says some of the protesters are there to incite violence.
These rioters are organized. These rioters are sponsored by somebody. We see Antifa flags out there. They're not just exercising their First Amendment.
Mullin says New Jersey officials were obstructing law enforcement.
The governor wasn't allowing state police and the mayor wasn't allowing local police to come in and help with these violent protesters. They were saying they were peaceful protesters. They're not, and they found out the first night they were there.
Newark Mayor Ross Baraka, meanwhile, announcing expanded police control around the facility, at the same time criticizing what he called overly aggressive tactics by law enforcement. Baraka also calling for Delaney Hall to be shut down. The demonstrations come amid growing political clashes over conditions inside the facility. White House Board Czar Tom Homan on Fox News rejecting allegations made by some lawmakers.
That you got Democratic lawmakers on Memorial Day making false allegations about the facility, about the food, the medical care, hunger strikes. I went into that facility. I went to the medical. I went to outdoor recreation, indoor recreation. I even made a surprise visit this weekend and walked into the cafeteria and ate the same meal that the detainees around me were eating.
Homan also disputing claims that detainees were staging a hunger strike inside the facility.
The food was good. It's all a false premise. There was never a hunger strike. The congressman said, oh, people are on hunger strike. No, they weren't. They may not be eating in the cafeteria, but what I found out, they're ordering food from the commissary, eating in their cells.
Meanwhile, Secretary Mullen in Dallas honoring 3 ICE officers for their actions during a sniper attack at an ICE facility last year.
These 3 and many others were willing to run towards the gunfire, put their life at risk, put their families at risk of losing their loved ones.
Mullen defending ICE officers from criticism.
You know, while we focus daily on getting the worst off the worst, or worst of the worst, we're definitely celebrating the best of the best. And it's frustrating to me when you hear the rhetoric of the left and they're demonizing law enforcement for simply doing their job.
Federal authorities also announcing charges against a Brooklyn man accused of threatening to kill an ICE officer and the officer's family during a protest outside the Newark Detention Center. The FBI saying the suspect, Nicholas Matthew Sculfo, was identified within 24 hours using facial recognition technology. Director Kash Patel warning, quote, "You touch a cop and this FBI will put you down."
And Secretary Mullen will testify before a Senate panel this afternoon on the department's 2027 budget. The hearing will be his first time appearing before the Senate since he was confirmed. President Trump's executive order, meanwhile aimed at tightening mail-in voting rules, is facing another legal challenge. A federal judge in Boston is hearing arguments today in lawsuits brought by Democratic-led states and voting rights groups. They're seeking to block the order ahead of the November midterm elections. The order directs the federal government to help states verify voter eligibility. It requires the Postal Service to deliver ballots only to voters on approved state mail-in lists and calls for election records to be preserved for 5 years. Opponents argue the measure exceeds presidential authority and could disrupt state election systems. The hearing comes days after a separate federal judge in Washington declined to pause the order, calling the challenge premature. As California voters prepare to head to the polls today, election officials are investigating damaged ballots found inside a Los Angeles drop box and vandalism at a vote center. New polling is also offering a clearer picture of the closely watched races for California governor and Los Angeles mayor. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more from Los Angeles.
Over the weekend, Los Angeles County election officials investigated possible election interference after damaged ballots were found burned inside this drop box behind me. And in a separate incident, vandalism was discovered at a Long Beach voting center, although officials say voting operations were not disrupted. Officials say a small number of ballots were damaged by fire between scheduled collections at a downtown Los Angeles drop box. The county says only a limited number of ballots were affected because the damage happened sometime between a scheduled ballot pickup on Saturday and the next collection Sunday morning. Election workers also discovered vandalism Sunday morning at a vote center in Long Beach's Cesar E. Chavez Park. Officials say voting was not disrupted in either case, and voters whose ballots may have been affected will be contacted and given options, including replacement ballots if needed. Both incidents remain under investigation. In Los Angeles' mayoral race, a UC Berkeley Institute of Governmental Studies poll, co-sponsored by the LA Times, shows Mayor Karen Bass leading with 26% support. City Council member Nithya Raman follows at 25%, while Spencer Pratt is at 22%. Bass told CNN what she thinks Pratt would be like as mayor.
I can't even imagine. I don't think I understand. He has a degree in political science, but he does not have a background or knowledge in how our government works.
Pratt responded to that on X, saying, quote, "We don't have to imagine Bass as mayor. We're living that disaster. That's why I'm taking her job." Actors Jane Fonda and Samuel L. Jackson have publicly backed Bass for re-election. Meanwhile, Entourage creator Doug Ellen voiced his support for Pratt, citing concerns about the city's direction and safety.
5 years ago, didn't lock a door here, but you know what happened? 2 animals invaded my house and all putting cameras and hiring security guards because we're all getting broken into. It's not made up, it's not false, and this city has collapsed in the last 5 years.
Meanwhile, a new Emerson College poll shows former U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra leading the governor's race with 28% support. Democrat Tom Steyer follows at 22%, with Republican Steve Hilton close behind at 21%. California voters still have time to cast their ballots. Voting centers across the state will be open on Election Day from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. local time. Reporting from downtown Los Angeles, Christina Corona, NTD News.
And thanks to Christina for that report. Meanwhile, 4 people have been charged in connection with a sophisticated cross-border drug tunnel operation. Federal prosecutors in Southern California say the tunnel was used to smuggle more than a ton of cocaine valued at over $45 million.
Since President Trump secured the border and launched the Take Back America initiative, the cartels have been deprived approximately $13 billion per year in annual revenue for alien smuggling. In response, the cartels such as CJ&G have dramatically increased efforts to import hugely profitable cocaine into the United States. Put directly, cocaine is now the lifeblood of the cartels. And what you see here today is a cardiac arrest for their system. For those defendants, they thought they saw a light at the end of the tunnel. In fact, what they saw were arc lights and sirens.
Authorities say a months-long Homeland Security Task Force investigation uncovered the nearly 2,000-foot tunnel. It stretches from Tijuana into a warehouse near San Diego. It's equipped with reinforced walls, ventilation, electricity, and a hydraulic lift. Investigators say surveillance of a suspected retail site known as Buy for Less revealed unusual activity, including the movement of suitcases and later coordinated vehicle transfers across multiple locations. K-9 units were alerted to the presence of narcotics during coordinated traffic stops. Inspections uncovered more than 1,000 kilograms of cocaine packed into dozens of bundles. U.S. service members and Pentagon civilian employees could soon face restrictions related to prediction markets. That's if the draft defense policy bill before Congress becomes law. It would bar them from using the markets to bet on global events if they have or could reasonably obtain relevant non-public information. The bill would require the defense secretary to issue related regulations and punishments. The proposal comes after a U.S. soldier allegedly used classified information to bet on the capture of Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro. Authorities in Iowa are investigating a series of shootings that left 6 people dead. Police say the suspected gunman took his own life during an encounter with officers. Police were first called yesterday to a home in the town of Muscatine where officers found 4 people fatally shot. Authorities later located the suspect, 52-year-old Ryan Willis McFarland, on a city trail. Police Chief Anthony Keyes says McFarland took his own life while officers were speaking with him. Investigators say 2 additional men were later found fatally shot at separate locations in the city, one inside a home and another at a business. They're also believed to be relatives of McFarland. Police have not identified the victims. The investigation is ongoing, and our thoughts are with the whole community there. Coming up, Russia unleashing attacks on major cities across Ukraine, killing over 20 people and injuring more. We've got the update there. And the Trump administration considering a new 25% tariff on Brazilian imports. The U.S. Trade Representative citing what he calls unfair trade practices.
Hi, I'm Ryan Blaney, a third-generation race car driver. And we dedicate a lot of our time to going as fast as possible. My grandpa Lou is the reason why my dad and I started racing, and I'm really proud to follow in his tracks. But when my grandpa was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was a very unexpected bump in the road for us. I've learned a lot on this journey with my grandpa Lou, and the memories of my grandpa will always be with me. And in our family, we're used to getting involved, and I encourage you to do the same, especially when it comes to caring for your loved ones. When I think about Alzheimer's and the impact it had on my family, I recognize that losing a race isn't such a bad day after all. It's important to notice if older family members are acting differently, experiencing problems with their memory, or having trouble with routine tasks. Talking about Alzheimer's can be really tough, but if you notice something, have a conversation with your loved one. Encourage them to see a doctor or offer to go with them. Early detection of Alzheimer's can give your family time to explore support services, make a plan for the future, and access available treatments. If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together.
Every day, thousands of kids start vaping. And I can't let this happen to my kid. Of course, it's awkward to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping. Hey, bestie, how sketch is vaping? It's hard to get their attention. Ready? Go. Yes, look at that. You even turn yours over. So if you want to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping, you have to get it trending. Right, Backpack Kid?
Let's do it.
First, invite your kid to do the vape talk. Let's try this. All right.
Why is he here?
Yeah, I gotta get it trending, honey.
Come on. To the left. To the right. Let's go.
Oh, honey, can we talk?
Yeah, what's up?
I see a lot of your friends vaping.
Visit talkaboutVaping.org for tips on when and how to have the vape talk.
I debate all day. It's what I do. But there are some things that are undebatable, like your mental health, my own mental health. I was in a dark place when my brother passed away in a car accident. I've never been more devastated than the day I lost my mom. I was depressed, miserable, in ways I never imagined. I reached out, and my sisters came. My pastor, my therapist. They helped me get through it. I found that the more I spoke up, the healthier my mind became. The chaos that was in me began to subside. I was more focused, clear. When you love your mind, you can go so much further. That's not up for debate. Find mental health resources at loveyourmindtoday.org.
Welcome back. Secretary of State Marco Rubio testifying on the State Department's budget request this morning. It's his first public testimony on Capitol Hill since the Iran war. Rubio spoke about his recent visit to China and the state of the U.S.-China relations, saying there are long-term problems that need addressing, which may take not just years, but perhaps decades.
We understand that there are areas in which long-term we're going to have some real challenges, whether it's supply chains. Put it to you this way, let's leave China aside for a moment. The United States, and I would argue the world, cannot depend on one country for 90% of anything, especially 90% of things that are critical to our economies, to our, not from our weapon systems to our pharmaceuticals. We just can't live in a world in which we rely on anybody for 90% of what we get in one sole source that could be cut off at any time as leverage against us or punishment or in a time of conflict. And so we are actively searching and have plans in place, and we're implementing these to diversify where we get critical minerals, where we get our supply chain, secure that supply chain. And obviously the Chinese would like to retain their monopoly position in some of these.
Rubio was also asked whether the administration was willing to release sanctions and frozen money to make a deal with the Iranian regime. Senator Murphy pressed Rubio on how soon the Strait of Hormuz could be reopened, which, as he put it, has to happen tomorrow.
Any sanctions relief is condition-based, which means it has to be in return for the reason why those sanctions were put in place in the first place, which is their nuclear program. So yeah, look, Iran is being sanctioned because they enrich uranium. Iran is being sanctioned because they've highly enriched uranium. Iran is being sanctioned because of their nuclear activities. If they agree to give up those things, there will be sanctions relief associated with their commitment and compliance.
Rubio will appear again before the House of Representatives Foreign Affairs Committee and House and Senate Appropriations Subcommittees over 2 days. The Trump administration is seeking congressional approval for its proposed 30% cut to the foreign affairs budget as it seeks a 50% increase in military spending. Israel and Lebanon are holding another round of peace talks as fighting between Israel and Hezbollah intensifies. U.S. and Israeli officials saying negotiations between ambassadors from the neighboring countries began today. The latest meeting marks the fourth round of face-to-face talks between Israeli and Lebanese officials. The two-day negotiations follow a security meeting between the two sides held on Friday at the Pentagon. Israeli troops and Hezbollah have continued to fight despite a mid-April ceasefire. The Lebanese government says more than 3,300 people have been killed. Israel says 24 of its soldiers and 4 civilians have been killed over the same period. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered troops to move further into Lebanon on Sunday. 5 cruise ship passengers have been released after 3 weeks of monitoring for hantavirus. They were at the National Quarantine Unit in Nebraska before returning to their home states. 13 passengers remain under observation. The CDC asked that the cruise ship passengers remain at the facility through May 31st. The University of Nebraska Medical Center says local and state public health departments will continue to monitor the passengers for the next 21 days. The passengers were among 18 U.S. residents aboard the ship who were placed under quarantine. The CDC says 41 U.S. residents are currently being monitored for possible infection. And the Trump administration is considering a new 25% tariff on Brazilian imports. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer citing what he called unfair trade practices. Greer's office said an investigation into Brazil's trade policies started last year and had found practices that, quote, are unreasonable and burden or restrict U.S. commerce. The report cited Brazil's policies related to digital trade, electronic payment services, anti-corruption enforcement, intellectual property protection, and ethanol market access. The proposed tariff would exclude some Brazilian products such as beef, coffee, rare earths, certain metals, and aircraft parts. The Office of the U.S. Trade Representative said the public is invited to provide written comments on the proposed tariffs by July 1st. The agency will hold a hearing about the proposed action on July 6th. Russia unleashing a massive air attack on Ukraine overnight. Ukrainian officials say Moscow launched hundreds of drones and missiles at cities across the country. Ukrainian authorities say the strikes killed at least 22 civilians and wounded more than 100 others. President Zelensky says Kyiv was hit particularly hard, with dozens of residential buildings damaged. In the city of Dnipro in central Ukraine, rescuers are still searching through the rubble after part of a 4-story apartment building collapsed during the strikes. Here's more on the latest Russian attack.
Russian drones and missiles pounded Ukrainian cities, leaving several dead and many injured on Tuesday. Ukraine's Air Force said Russia launched 656 drones and 73 missiles overnight, mainly targeting Kyiv. Meanwhile, the Russian Defense Ministry said that its massive overnight strike on the country was a response to what it called terrorist acts against targets inside Russia, and said it had struck a range of Ukrainian military targets using high-precision, long-range weapons. Authorities confirmed fatalities in the cities of Kyiv and Dnipro following days of warnings that Moscow was planning a major assault. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko of Kyiv said that aside from the deaths recorded, children were among those injured in the strikes. He also said a suspected missile strike on a 24-story apartment building triggered a collapse, which likely left people trapped under the rubble. Witnesses said thousands sought shelter in the capital subway system. In Dnipro, Regional Governor Alexander Hansha confirmed several deaths and said all those injured in the attack on the area were in the hospital in moderate condition. Meantime, Mayor Ihor Terekhov confirmed a child was also among the handful of people hurt by attacks on Kharkiv. Air raid warnings sounded over much of the country early Tuesday after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reiterated warnings the previous day of a possible major assault. Russia said last week that it intended systematic strikes on targets in Kyiv over what it says was a drone attack on a dormitory in Russian-held Luhansk, which killed 21. Ukraine denied conducting that strike.
1 American soldier and 1 British soldier have died during a training exercise in Iraq. U.S. and UK officials say the deaths happened Sunday at an airbase in Iraq's semi-autonomous Kurdish region. The U.S. Army says the American service member's identity is being withheld until family notification is complete. Britain's defense ministry says the British soldier's family has been informed and asked for privacy before further details are released. The U.S. has reduced its troop presence in Iraq, but it still maintains forces in the Kurdish region as Washington works to strengthen ties with the Kurds. And our hearts go out to those service members and their families. The Pentagon, meanwhile, tightening press access inside the building. The Department of War designating its press office a classified space. The Department of War saying journalists are being removed from the area to make room for speechwriters who handle classified material. The change means reporters will only be able to access Pentagon press officials by appointment. The move comes amid growing tensions between the Pentagon and major legacy news organizations over press restrictions and classified information leaks. The New York Times suing the Department of War last month, arguing new escort requirements for reporters inside the Pentagon violate the First Amendment. Meanwhile, Meta is expanding teen safety content settings across Instagram, Facebook, and Messenger globally as it faces growing scrutiny over youth online safety. That and more after this.
Abused, in danger. Covenant House is helping young people with nowhere else to turn. Please call or go online now with your gift of $19 a month. You'll help provide hot meals, safe shelter, medical care, and love. We'll send you this comforting blanket as a reminder of the love you're showing a young person this holiday season. Call or go online now to safeplacetosleep.org, and your first month's gift will be matched.
I trod on my glasses yesterday, and I had to pay up front for a new pair that I can't even pick up for another 10 days. So I looked for another way, and I found Select Specs. I ordered online. My new glasses just arrived this morning, and I can pay over the next few weeks. This is the way to buy glasses.
See now, pay later with Select Specs. Next day delivery and deferred payment options. Only at selectspecs.com.
There's a whirlwind of emotion and activity going on in this painting. And there's chaos all around and threat from below. The wolves surrounding her, and they're anything but unmoved. They're moving all the time, and we sense that. But this little girl remains unmoved.
She's in quite a perilous situation, but she's completely strong and serene, and she's actually meditating. It was very, very well liked because no matter what culture or what sort of walk of life you're from, I think people, they see it and they immediately understand what that energy, what that message is, and they're drawn to it because everybody kind of needs a little bit of that in their own life, of, you know, the steadfast calmness and something to hold on to. It's definitely an inner peace in the midst of something very chaotic, and for a lot of people right now, the whole world is very, very chaotic, so I guess that's another reason why so many people are very drawn to this.
Welcome back. Meta says it's expanding content settings for teen accounts across Instagram, Facebook, and Messenger globally. The change aims to limit access to inappropriate content for younger users as scrutiny grows over youth safety online. Meta says the 13+ content setting will remain the default. It filters material deemed unsuitable for teens. A new limited content option will roll out to Facebook and Messenger later this year. The company also says Instagram is testing a feature to reduce repetitive exposure to certain topics, aiming for a more balanced feed for teen users. Critics say bans or restrictions do not stop teens from going online, arguing such measures force them to access platforms in unregulated, less safe environments or use other apps without parental supervision. Amazon, meanwhile, will host its annual Prime Day sales event this month after launching the event in July for the past 5 years. The e-commerce giant citing major holidays and sporting events in its decision. Prime Day is one of Amazon's biggest sales events of the year. According to data from Adobe Analytics, the event drove over $24 billion in online spending in the U.S. for 2025, when the company extended the event from 2 days to 4. Speaking to Reuters, Amazon Prime's international vice president pointed to the FIFA World Cup and the 250th anniversary of U.S. independence on July 4th. Amazon held its last June Prime Day in 2021. This year's event will run from June 23rd to June 26th. Police in Pennsylvania have answered a riddle that has plagued mankind for generations. Why did the chicken cross the road? In this case, it didn't. Officers in Bethel Park were called to the scene when a chicken wandering in the middle of the road apparently couldn't decide whether to cross. As you can see, they had plenty of fun with the bird, making her an honorary officer that works in the dispatch center. They even named her Lieutenant McQuail. That was after she evaded police, and it required a short foot pursuit to capture her. They referred to it as a case of foul play. Investigators got to work and determined the hen is a Plymouth Rock chicken. Ultimately, they granted her a leave of absence so she can wait in a foster flock for her owner to come forward. And we hope she finds her forever home very soon. And in North Carolina, deputies found this one wandering along roads Tuesday morning. Despite multiple attempts, they are so far unable to locate the owner. The Union County Sheriff's Office is asking anyone who recognizes the pony or knows its owner to contact them. And that's all we have time for this hour. But if you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at news.today@ntd.com. We always love to hear from you. Stay with us. We'll be broadcasting the White House press briefing right after this break.
It's finally here, our second annual mega sale. This sale only comes around once a year, so take advantage of the best offers ever while you can. For example, save 50% on our Giza Dream bed sheets, as low as $29.98. And for the first time ever on TV, MyPillow mattresses and MyPillow mattress toppers, as low as $99.98. And you save 50% on our Lux Pure 6-piece towel sets. Regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And our best-selling standard MyPillows, regular $49.98, on sale for $17.98. Wait on it, mega sale, only $14.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our second annual mega sale. But wait, there's more. To make the mega sale even more special, when you order right now, your order's going to ship absolutely free.
The 8th NTD International Piano Competition welcomes distinguished pianists from around the world, celebrating the depth, discipline, and expressive power of the Baroque, classical, and romantic repertoire. September 1st through the 5th, 2026, New York City. Apply at piano.ntdtv.com, honoring the timeless tradition of the piano. According to ancient Chinese medicine, purslane is considered a medicinal herb and is used to help lower cholesterol, improve vascular functions, and prevent diabetes. Perilla seeds can nourish the lungs and spleen. It is used to treat asthma and improve pulmonary functions. Puritang green vegetable omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds from Hwangmae Mountain in South Korea. It contains over 90% of omega-3, 6, 7, and 9. The highest concentration possible without chemical additives. The soft gel is made of natural seaweed. It is 100% organic and vegan. Both adults and children can take it with peace of mind. Ancient recipes were passed down from heaven to to bring prosperity and longevity. Puritan Green Vegetable Omega 3.
Mathis Home is the place to find the latest looks for your new dining room.
And now's the time to come in with Memorial Day savings store-wide.
This dining set is a perfect example. Get the 72-inch table in a deep black finish with 4 upholstered side chairs and the bench. All 6 pieces for just $6.99. That's an incredible deal.
We have over 100 dining sets in stock with fast and easy financing and free delivery. Get your new dining room today.
With Memorial Day savings at your furniture superstore, Mathis Home.
There are real consequences to controlled media. And NTD's founders know them firsthand. Our freedom of thought is the price. This is the lesson that guides us in everything we do.
So there's the tear gas there.
We know the value of a free society. And we take seriously the responsibility to preserve it. We are NTD.
Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. President Trump saying a deal with Iran could come over the next week. What's behind the fresh tensions between Israel and Lebanon, and how President Trump is intervening. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Capitol Hill today as he testifies at back-to-back hearings for the first time since the Iran war began. President Trump says he's appointing William J. Pulte to serve as acting director of national intelligence while he continues his current roles, including leading federal housing finance and overseeing major mortgage institutions. Several primary races are taking place across the nation today, with 2 high-profile governor's races and several swing seats. The U.S. labor market is showing resilience, and amid uncertainty, the latest report on job openings is beating expectations.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today's Tuesday, June 2nd. I'm Stephanie Cox. President Trump says a deal with Iran to extend the ceasefire could come soon. It comes as the Secretary of State explains how Iran is trying to take advantage of a delaying tactic. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent, Iris Tao. Good afternoon, Iris. What's the latest?
Good afternoon to you as well, Steph. So President Trump telling ABC in a new interview that he thinks an agreement with Iran on its nuclear ambitions to extend the ceasefire as well as reopen the Strait of Hormuz could come as early as over the next week. It comes as Secretary of State Marco Rubio is testifying before Congress today for the first time after the Iran conflict started. Rubio highlighting how Iran, of course, is still in the process of getting back to the U.S. on a potential peace agreement. He's also highlighting the fact that he thinks the war with Iran is over as Iran's military capabilities have been largely degraded. He highlighting that both conventional weapons shield and defense industrial base have been degraded, and that a U.S. blockade against Iran in the Strait of Hormuz is costing Iran hundreds of millions of dollars each day. On Iran's nuclear ambitions, Rubio, while noting the ongoing negotiation process, is saying that the current progress is already unprecedented. Watch.
There is the prospect before us, which could happen today, it could happen tomorrow, it could happen next week, that for the first time, certainly in my memory, they have agreed to negotiate aspects of their nuclear program that just a month ago, or just a year ago, they were refusing to even mention, much less enter into discussions about.
And late last week, President Trump saying that Iran has already agreed to no nuclear weapon. And after reviewing that agreement in the Situation Room for about 2 hours, according to White House officials, reports suggest that President Trump is now demanding stronger language on Iran's commitment on no nuclear weapon, as well as on its commitment to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And now, again, U.S. waiting for Iran to get back. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, during his testimony, saying that Iran's leadership remains highly fractured, and he also says there are some elements in that regime that understand what the U.S. is saying when it comes to these talks, but there are also elements that are more resistant to making agreements. Secretary saying that Iran is using this delaying tactic to its advantage. Watch.
What's complicated them is you ultimately are negotiating with people who then have to negotiate within their own system to see what they're allowed to give and what they're allowed to agree to. What is abundantly clear is that Iran is facing severe internal economic. And this is why you see reporting about there might be a deal in the next few days, because internally it takes time to get responses from them, sometimes upward to 5 or 6 days.
It all comes amid new clash between Israel and Lebanon-based Hezbollah. President Trump, telling a reporter in ABC interview that he quickly turned around a little glitch and reaching a deal with Iran by brokering a truce between Israel and Hezbollah. President Trump announcing yesterday that he talked to both sides and ultimately both sides to agree to stop fighting. It comes, though, as Israel, while backing off from its threat to strike Beirut, still had new clashes with Hezbollah overnight. And now we know that a while ago, actually, Trump administration did negotiate a truce between Israel and Lebanon, and during which the Trump administration emphasized how Hezbollah, a militant group based in Lebanon, also backed by Iran to target Israel, is the common enemy of both Israel and Lebanon. Let's take a look.
Both are victimized by the same terrorist organization, a terrorist organization that no doubt has victimized Israel, but has also victimized the people.
But Lebanon was a great country. It was a beautiful country, smart people, very brilliant people, doctors, professors, economists, some of the smartest people on the planet. But it got torn apart by different factions and nothing having to do with them, outside factors. So I think it can be brought back pretty quickly.
And today, the fourth round of talks between Lebanon and Israel are happening at the State Department in Washington, D.C., mediated by the U.S. And that is part of a larger peace plan for the region that the Trump administration is now pushing for. Back to you.
All right, thanks for that report, Iris Tao. President Trump, meanwhile, saying he's appointing William J. Pulte to serve as acting director of national intelligence while he continues in his current roles. The president saying Pulte will remain director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency and also continue as chairman of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. President Trump highlighted Pulte's experience managing sensitive matters and overseeing more than $10 trillion in markets tied to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. He noted that figure is up substantially from a year ago. President Trump says the appointment reflects confidence in Pulte's leadership across both housing finance and national intelligence responsibilities. Several primary state races are taking place across the nation today, notably in some key toss-up races. NTD's Melina Wisecup has that report.
The most watched race today will be the race for California's governor. The primary shaping up there is a nonpartisan primary, meaning only the top two performing candidates will make it to the November ballot. So we could see a situation where you have the top two Democrats on that ballot or two Republicans on the ballot in November. Now remember, this was also an area where there was a shakeup for the Democrat Party when Congressman Eric Swalwell left the race after those sexual misconduct allegations surfaced against him. Now on the Democrat side, you have the two leading candidates, former Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra and Tom Steyer. On the Republican side, the top candidate there is Steve Hilton, TV show host.
Everywhere you look, there's this sense that things aren't working and it's time for change. And that's why I think it's actually really important that I'm in the top two so that Californians have a choice.
President Trump doubling down on his endorsement for Steve in a post last evening, writing, "People are fleeing, crime is increasing, and taxes are high. Steve can turn it around." This type of messaging was also seen in the race for LA mayor. Here's what the Republican candidate in that race, Spencer Pratt, had to say.
We need change in LA. We can't do 4 more years of Karen Bass. There won't be in LA. We lose 50,000 people last year. Over 100 businesses closed. I meet with people now that have a lot of investment in LA. If Karen Bass were to get reelected, they're all leaving.
He's trying to make it to the November ballot to have a chance at unseating current Democrat Mayor Karen Bass, who's running for her second term.
We don't need a TV reality show villain, nor do we need a former councilwoman who has been in City Hall twice as long as I have and who is okay with tents in the street.
There are also several congressional races that I'm watching in California, like who will fill the seat of Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi in the 11th district, where she served for the past 40 years. Also, how powerful will Pelosi's endorsement be in this race? She's endorsed Connie Chan. There's also a pickup opportunity for Democrats in the 48th district. The Republican-held district was just redrawn to favor Democrats. There's also a governor's race shaping up in Iowa. 5 Republicans are vying to fill the seat of current Governor Kim Reynolds, who's leaving office. A late-night endorsement came from President Trump in this race as well. He endorsed Representative Randy Feenstra. Whichever Republican prevails in this race will face Democrat Rob Sand in November, who's running unopposed in his primary. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
And thanks to Melina for that report. Also in Iowa, Democrats are eyeing a pickup opportunity for a U.S. Senate seat. Republican Senator Joni Ernst's seat will need to be filled this November. Either Josh Churek or Zach Walz will become the Democrat tasked with flipping the seat from red to blue. Trump-backed Representative Ashley Hinson is dominating on the Republican side. Democrats are also eyeing a Senate seat in Montana. Republican Senator Steve Daines left the race late in the game, giving other Republicans little opportunity to register against former U.S. Attorney Kurt Alme. And New Jersey's 7th District is one of the 2 top targets for House Democrats. Republican Representative Tom Keene was endorsed by Trump. It's a toss-up district. Democrat Rebecca Bennett, a former Navy helicopter pilot, is favored to win the nomination.
This is how I keep my joints happy.
Omega XL is a powerful natural supplement backed by 40 years of clinical research. Take control of your pain, like Cynthia Bailey.
My knees in particular started giving me pain issues all the way back to my modeling days, from just running through airports, photo shoots. After taking Omega XL, I really started to notice how less stiff I was, especially my knees and my hip. Has Omega XL changed my life? Yes. I barely notice my joint pain anymore. Now I'm like literally sprinting through the airports. My secret is Omega XL.
Pick up the phone and call now to get this exclusive TV offer. Buy 1 Omega XL and we'll send you a second bottle absolutely free. You'll also get a free bottle of Vitamin XL D3. Buy 1, get 2 free. A total value of over $115, all for just $49.95. You save more than 55% and shipping is free. Backed by a money-back guarantee and is not available in stores. Operators are standing by, so call now.
Kids love it. Parents trust it. Obviously. Explore GJW Plus Kids Series and Gone Campus courses led by expert educators. This is spectacular. Children will learn values like respect, responsibility, and knowledge in language, science, and more. Wow. All while having fun. Perfect. Subscribe today at GJW Plus Kids, where learning meets fun.
There's a whirlwind of emotion and activity going on in this painting. And there's chaos all around and threat from below. The wolves surrounding her, and they're anything but unmoved. They're moving all the time, and we sense that. But this little girl remains unmoved.
She's in quite a perilous situation, but she's completely strong and serene, and she's actually meditating. It was very, very well liked because no matter what culture or what sort of walk of life you're from, I think people, they see it and they immediately understand.
It's a massive achievement because it's usually just skyrocketing. And it's an important issue for a lot of folks in America because almost 1 in 3 Americans, when they go to a pharmacy to pick up a medication that their doctors prescribe for them, leaves empty-handed because they can't afford the medication, especially for branded products. And part of the reason for this, it's unknown to a lot of Americans, but is well recognized by the president and this administration, is that our drug prices are about 3 times higher on average than the same drugs made in the same facilities in the same American factories oftentimes than they are charging patients overseas in Europe, Asia, and other parts of the world. It's global freeloading. It's wrong. The president demanded that we change it, and as most of you know, we spent much of last year negotiating with the 17 largest pharmaceutical companies that drive over 80% of the entire business in branded pharmaceuticals, and every single one of them agreed to a most favored nation drug pricing strategy, which simply stated means that these medications, especially going into the future, will be priced at the same amount as the rest of the world. It doesn't mean price fixing. We're not telling pharmaceutical companies what to charge. We're saying to them, whatever you charge us, you got to charge the other folks, which means we might be able to help you overseas to get better pricing so that you can make up some of the losses that you'll experience here. And the Council of Economic Advisors estimated that the benefit of the president's negotiated program is about $600 billion over the next 10 years, $600 billion of savings. The question then becomes, how do you actually get that savings to the American people? And we work together with some wonderful folks, Joe Gebbia and Korstein, who have been building the TrumpRx.gov site. And I've got an announcement that today we are adding 160 more drugs to this site. Now, the site already has 700 or so, or 600 or so drugs, so it's going to take it over 750 total. But that is an important number for other reasons. It means that 4 out of 5 medications that are picked up by Americans going into that same drugstore that I mentioned earlier now have the opportunity to double check that the price they're getting in that drugstore, wherever they're buying it from, is the best price out there. So it's a transparency site. It gives everybody the ability to make important decisions about medications they're purchasing with full knowledge of what the cost of those medications are. And that's important because transparency drives cost-effective changes in how we procure and consume products. You would never buy a car without knowing the cost of the car. Some of these medications cost what a car costs. And so these are important assets for the American people to have. I'll put some numbers on this. In the 2 weeks since we did the last event with the president on this topic, we're now up to about 12 million unique visitors to the site. Estimated savings are about $500 million, and again, climbing rapidly as more Americans learn about the program. And it is our great hope and belief that the average American, before they make a purchasing decision for a pharmaceutical product, will start using TrumpRx.gov as a standard, as a baseline, to take advantage of something that's been given to you. Again, there's no money made from this site. The government does not charge money to people using this site. It's an opportunity for you to be empowered. That stated, I want to add to that one additional insight that some of you would like to hear, which is that starting on July 1st, the patients on beneficiaries on Medicare who are eligible for GLP products, the weight loss products that the president speaks of frequently, will be allowed to obtain those products for $50 a month. Now, the list price, as you know, for a lot of these drugs is well over $1,000 a month. We've been working hard to push down on these prices to make sure that these medications, which can be life-changing and even life savings because of their impact on weight loss and downstream complications like diabetes and hypertension and all the things that they cause, like kidney failure and heart disease and strokes and dementia, even cancers, all those risk factors are going to be mitigated, we believe, if these medications are used correctly. And so when doctors prescribe them, Medicare beneficiaries will be able to obtain them for $50 a month. And we are hopeful that over the next few years, we will show an actual savings to the American taxpayer if these medications are used correctly and appropriately and consistently, so folks get the weight loss they desire with the downstream benefits that I mentioned earlier. I also want to touch briefly on the crushing of fraud, waste, and abuse made possible by the Vice President's anti-fraud task force. The White House task force has been aggressively going after an all-of-government approach. I'll speak personally as the person charged with the Medicare and Medicaid services when we identify, by looking at the data, which we have plenty of, that there's an aberrancy in how these bills are coming into us, so there might be fraud there. It's incredibly empowering for us to quickly call the Office of Inspector General or the FBI, the Department of Justice, and to have Todd Blanche call back and say, here's what we're going to do about what you just observed, or call Scott Bessent at Treasury and say, we need forensic accounting. Something is going on here. Where are they hiding the money? And I want to emphasize that this is sophisticated work because our opponents are extraordinarily sophisticated in their attacks on our system. They just need to have a Medicare beneficiary number or some other ID, which is basically a credit card, and they can begin charging against the federal tax dollars that go into Medicare and Medicaid. That's one of the reasons we're seeing such high amounts of fraud in different parts of the country, and we believe there are organized criminal groups behind some of these endeavors. So I wanted to walk you through a couple of these examples because our goal is to stop the money from ever leaving the building. That is the best way to protect the American taxpayer. As you know, we were in Minnesota last week where the largest autism takedown occurred. A mother and a daughter, adult daughter, were accused of tens of millions of dollars of theft. Just to put this in perspective, the reason these are so important is if you defraud the system, you don't just take money out of the system. People steal your money. The money from our most vulnerable Americans are going to steal their health. They'll steal their life. And that's what we have been seeing in some of these takedowns. Unfortunately, when these events don't happen in a timely fashion, you lose the whole program. So in Minnesota, the state itself stopped non-emergency medical transportation, which is when you need someone to take you to the doctor's appointment. They cut the whole program. It's gone. It's finished. Because they could not deal with the fraud. It went from an estimated $1 million a year, how much can it cost to take a card to a doctor's office, to over $100 million a year, so they killed the program. And that, of course, we believe, because it doesn't provide the kind of care we desire for our fellow Americans, can be problematic. We don't want that to happen in other endeavors as well. So we've been working with the state of Minnesota. We're not happy with some of the things we've been encountering as we look at their receipts on the services they provided, which is why we deferred $350 million to the state of Minnesota, and we're waiting to hear feedback from them. Other states have also been problematic. California comes to mind, where we've made several trips of late. 1/3 of all of the hospice in the entire country. And hospice is a precious, beautiful program built in the 80s to take care of people with dignity in the last months of their life. Classically, someone has metastatic cancer, they're going to die. It's going to happen in a few months. You give up your Medicare, because why would you want Medicare? You don't need all those things. Take hospice instead. But that trade has risks with it if you don't actually have a lethal problem. And when 1/3 of all the hospices in the entire country are in Los Angeles, not even California, and Los Angeles, that creates issues. First of all, it's not plausible, but it also means someone's been ignoring the problem. And in fact, there was a call 4 years ago by the state auditor in California to address these problems. It was not managed, so our agency has now suspended payments to 850, almost half of all the hospices in California now have been suspended, but they're no longer being paid. And we're going to keep aggressively going at this problem, because when we go after hospice in California, guess what happens? Hospice in Nevada went up 7-fold. Hospice in Arizona, hospice in Texas, they've all gone up. These scoundrels run to other areas. I just learned this morning, now they're infiltrating the home healthcare space in California, which is equally a problem, because now they're taking advantage of a different sector of the population, this time Medicaid, but using nefarious techniques and technologies to do that as well. And again, these are organized criminal syndicates, we believe, in many instances. And that's why being a personal care service attendant, which is, again, doing something that your family would normally do for you, carrying groceries upstairs, driving you somewhere, that job is now by twofold the most common job in California, and it's the most common job in New York. Again, this defies belief that you can get that much growth in single sectors, but these are well-paid jobs that have become now ubiquitously available. There's not been strong guardrails. The last administration did not think that this was an important endpoint. The endpoint was enrolling people and getting people onto these different programs, and that has led to a tremendous opportunity for corrupting the system, and that's what we're witnessing. With that in mind, there's lots we can do to fix these problems. We've been aggressively going after states, red and blue. We wrote a letter to Florida. The difference, by the way, was Florida responded by saying, we know we have a problem. We're going to double down. We want a moratorium on all of our durable medical equipment suppliers. And why? Because there are twice as many durable medical equipment suppliers in South Florida than McDonald's. Again, not really possible unless you're looking the other way. We're not looking the other way. We're aggressively taking on these challenges. And I'm going to reemphasize something that I'm hoping everyone appreciates. But if you're defrauding our most vulnerable citizens in America, do not walk away from this threat, run away from us because we're coming after you. All right. I've got, give me 1 second. I was actually given a cheat sheet, which you all know I got. Shelby, the new media, take it away.
Thanks. I actually wanted to ask about that nationwide moratorium. Industry groups are really concerned about growth and employment getting hurt if that moratorium expands beyond 6 months. Would you rule out an extension of that moratorium, or do you expect that it's going to be expanded?
I'm not going to rule out an extension. We have been talking to industry groups about these moratoriums. In fact, just as for everybody watching, all of you as well, we benefit from whistleblowers. Our most important whistleblowers have been members of industry who know the game, know how you can cheat it if you're unethical, and they point out to us when these problems occur. So we do not want to hurt the folks who are earnestly involved in hospice, in durable medical equipment suppliers, personal care services. They're good people in these businesses, but we're going to slow down the growth of these sectors till we can get our arms around the problem, because it is of massive magnitude to us. When we go to, let's go over here. Go ahead.
Dr. Oz, thank you so much. Kara Castronova from Lindell TV with two important questions that the American people voted for and care deeply about. Many Americans fear a future administration could reinstate COVID-era vaccine mandates through Medicare and Medicaid funding. Would you support and create reforms to prevent that from happening again? What can you do during your remaining time at CMS to ensure Americans are never forced to choose between their jobs and a forced vaccination?
Well, the president talked about this a bit on Friday with an executive order that desires to provide states with better science to be able to make educated decisions. It is an embarrassment that during COVID we allowed ideology and fear to dictate healthcare policy. Many clinicians at the time couldn't understand where these ideas were coming from. It certainly soured the American people on the trust that their government had historically had in recommending public policy efforts. The president argues, and he's right, and Secretary Kennedy strongly believes we need gold standard science. We need that science to be able to help families make better decisions for themselves, and state governments, because these are state-driven issues usually, especially mandates, to make those decisions more wisely. If we can do this in the right way, it will be very empowering, because who loves children the most? Their parents. No matter what we might say, they're the ones who need to have the information. They should have the ability to make the wisest choices for their kids, not based in fear, but based in science. Stephen.
One more nursing home stuff, Roz, if you don't mind.
Let me go one at a time. If you asked multiple...
Fear that a future president might walk away, and what do you make of the congressional pushback? And also on my tragedy derived from Kratom, President Trump has expressed interest. Can you describe the debate within the administration on that?
Let me answer the first one, because there's not a big debate on the second one. The reality around the most favored nation drug pricing is the president has dealt with the entire problem for this administration. But these contracts expire after this administration is done. So like so many things the president's trying to do, he's trying to set it up for the next administration so that they don't have to fight the same battle. Now, it's going to be difficult for pharmaceutical companies to pull back. But we still believe it makes sense for Congress to codify what we've been able to achieve, because it's been so helpful. Think about the $600 billion of savings to the average American over the next 10 years. It's just a massive number that they voluntarily, sort of, gave back because the president went after them and said, you got to deal with this problem. And by the way, when we knocked on the door of these pharmaceutical company leaders, you know what they said? We knew one day you'd come for us. They weren't surprised. They knew that this couldn't continue. So the president wants Congress, which I know has a lot on its plate, but there are ongoing discussions around the great health care plan. Just last week, the Workforce Committee pushed something out that is going to be on PBM reform, pharmacy benefits management companies, or the middlemen that often are involved between the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies. So there's other parts of the legislation moving forward. But just to remind you, the great health care plan is codifying most favored nation drug pricing so it lasts for decades into the future, as we believe it should. This is all forward-looking, doesn't hurt these companies today, just make sure America's protected in the future. We want plain English insurance policies so you can actually understand the document that you're being given. We want transparency, so when you go to a hospital, to a doctor's office, that you actually know what you're getting. Guys, as a doctor, when I prescribe something for you, I often don't know what it's going to cost you to pick up what I just told you to get. These are things that are fixable, and the pharmacy benefits is another part of this. Let's go to, I'm going to back, Daily Wire, Mary.
Thank you, Dr. Oz, right over here. Thank you. My colleague Luke Rosiak just reported, and he's done a lot on this,
His investigations into Medicaid fraud and home health have repeatedly brought him to foreign-born healthcare operators. Is CMS tracking what percentage of home health recipients are refugees or foreign-born, and why are foreigners using these programs at such higher rates than for Americans?
Well, we are tracking illegal immigrants taking advantage of all health care plans. We've already recouped, or we've actually told California they owe us $2 billion. We've got half of it back already. I'm confident we'll get the rest because they have state-based programs that we don't have a lot of visibility into, but because of the Working Families Tax Cut legislation and other rulemaking, we are no longer allowing foreign folks who are here illegally to benefit from these programs. And just to put it in context, in California, if you're on Medi-Cal, the Medicaid program in California, until this administration, you got full dental and full vision benefits. Now, I'm for those benefits. I like them, but we don't give that to Medicare patients. And so we should at least be equitable, and all of us together should decide what we are going to do as a nation. So if we as a country decide we're going to go in one direction, you can't have states splintering off if they're going to spend the other people's money. The fraud, for example, that I'm talking about and the use of money for illegal immigrants, the people who pay that bill when it, for example, the largesse of California allows folks to get benefits that the rest of the country doesn't think is appropriate for illegal immigrants or home health care providers, that money's paid by folks who are taxpayers in New Mexico, which is a blue state, and Mississippi, a red state. So this is not partisan. Everybody is taxed extra and has to put more into the kitty because some states are doing things that we don't think as a country we would like to have happen. That's why this administration has been so dogged in this issue and why the president has been so aggressive. Go ahead, Mary.
On Ebola, if Kenya does end up blocking the U.S. quarantine facility there, and it seems like they might since the Kenyan courts are delaying it, where will Americans who have been exposed end up going? And then why can't they just come to the United States? I mean, I think you would probably agree that the U.S. has pretty good health care here. So where will they go, and why not to the U.S.?
Jennifer, the main issue with having a facility close to the Democratic Republic of the Congo is if a patient is sick. Again, I'll speak as a heart doctor. I want to take the patient to the OR that's right next door to the room they're sick in, not to the building next to them, or to 3 buildings 2 blocks away, because that time is precious to us. You have a golden hour in many of these instances around trauma, but for illnesses, it's also relatively short. So we are confident, and the State Department's working on this diligently, that they're going to be able to work out something with Kenya. There has already been a fair amount of communication around this issue. We have and that's about it. There's a UK base there. We have other people who might be willing to welcome us, and we have our German colleagues as well. So there's many places we can send folks, but sending them across the world, especially when we're not sure what's going on with them, is probably not the wisest move. In red, take it away.
Thank you so much. Alina Shirazi from the Daily Mail. This is the 4th checkup that the president has had. He's supposed to have 1 a year. He's had several CT heart scans. What are the doctors looking for? And second question, I think you might like this one better. Who has been your favorite cabinet secretary so far to do the briefings at the podium?
That may not be my favorite question. That might, I mean, they're all obviously different. I think Scott Besant's dry humor is fabulous. Marco is just an earnestly funny person. We can tell all kinds of stories about Marco's entertaining commentary. I think JD was spectacular. You know, he's just very on his game, understands the issues, and he understands the American people, which is I appreciated his presentation so much. And I did watch them all, by the way, just to prepare. I'm a doctor. I try to do my homework. I prep for the case. The first issue was about Ebola. No, about President Trump's
examinations. He's had 4 already. The president's supposed to have 1 a year.
Yeah. So I actually have talked to the president about what he's sent to all of you. And I think it's just a routine, regular exam. You remember I had the president on my show 10 years ago, and he also presented records. And at the time, I was stunned at how well he was doing, because so many of these numbers naturally over time will start going in the wrong direction. But if you look at these records, they're spectacular. You know, his cholesterol, his blood pressure, all the numbers are starting in excellent parameters. His ability, and listen, I work with him frequently. Many of you get to see him almost every day. That amount of energy and that amount of mental acuity does not exist in a vacuum. You have to have a vessel to carry it, and the president has a unique ability to just keep going at all hours of the day with remarkable strength. Let's go. Right behind you. Yeah.
So the administration has been stressing reshoring manufacturing, pharmaceutical manufacturing as part of that. From those announcements of those 17 pharmaceutical companies, what's the timeline that we could see those projects come to fruition? Is it summer? Is it end of this year?
Well, these companies are already making investments in America. Some are ongoing, some have announced. I went to a ribbon cutting in one in Charlottesville recently. And so there's a lot of investment coming to America. But think about what you would do if you're a pharma executive. If you're a pharma executive and America's open for business and we're trying to support innovation, saving people from, cancer, autoimmune problems, dementia, all these different, you want to be where the action is. So these companies are coming here. It's actually a brain drain from Europe in particular, but other parts of the world as well, of companies who want to come here. So it's not just that we're already going, it's going to get bigger and bigger and louder. No, the jobs are starting when the first time you hire someone to build a plan for you, we have a job. If you're asking for people with picks and helmets, that's also coming quickly. But again, I've been to facilities that are already under construction, so they're starting, and and the president and I visited a facility in Cincinnati a few months ago that, again, they already have the facility, they're already running the facility, they're making additional investments to upgrade their program. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I know this isn't your wheelhouse, but you are speaking on behalf of the White House today. Can you respond to any of the criticism from Republicans on President Trump's decision to tap Bill Pulte, who has no known intelligence experience, as acting DNI?
Well, I think Bill's a great guy. I know him socially. I've not worked with him in his current job, but I do trust the president's judgment. He is a very sharp, quick study of people, their emotional abilities, and their ability to persevere in the face of hardship. So I have confidence in his decision. Yes, ma'am.
Back on Ebola, given the World Cup coming up and millions of visitors coming to the United States, on the U.S. preparation for this, who is in charge of proactive surveillance measures, and what type of surveillance will the United States be doing for visitors coming in? Will that be expanded beyond the DRC, Uganda, and Sudan? Can you describe what is in place, knowing this influx of people coming soon?
So Jay Bhattacharya, who I spoke to this morning, who is our brilliant leader of the NIH, but also CDC now, is running this program. He's got a lot of help from Dr. Heidi Overton and many others at the White House. So it's a well-constructed game plan. They aggressively got into, and they're funding now, a lot of the treatments that are being offered in the DRC and the Kenya facilities, just an extra way for us to take folks who are Americans who need help. But we have very purposefully put up testing tools and mechanisms at the major airports that people will be traveling through. I have great confidence in Jay's ability. He's a brilliant scientist and knows a lot about viruses. He wrote one of the most important papers really describing the true reality of what was happening during COVID early in the pandemic. It got him in the hot water because it was not convenient to hear it, but he's a brave man who will make the right decisions and be transparent about them. In pink.
Just back to the question about Bill Pulte. Congressional statute says any appointee for the position of the Director of National Intelligence shall have extensive national security expertise. What extensive national security expertise does he have?
Ma'am, you're asking me a question that's out of my lane. I'm so focused on making sure Americans are healthy that I have not been looking at what other agencies. Take that, yes. And the edge, go ahead. Yellow tie, go.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right. Okay. That was fun. Dr. Oz, just now you said that it should be surprising to people that personal care service attendant is now by twofold the most common job in California and the most common job in New York. The U.S. healthcare industry has been growing rapidly, 7 to 8% annually. It's an estimated $5.3 trillion in growth. Healthcare accounts for about 18% of GDP. Why should people be surprised that in two of the most populous states in the country, a healthcare-related job like that would be a common job when it is, again, one of the fastest growing and continuously growing industries in the U.S.? I mean, what's going on here?
The primary difference between paying for a hernia operation and paying someone to be a personal care service is the reason it's concerning to us. If you're having a hernia operation, you have a scar. So I know you got something, and you have a doctor who is licensed, and you had it done in a facility that's also credentialed and has been inspected. When you get personal care services, it's an unlicensed person in an unmonitored setting promising they did something. That's a lot of handshakes and finger crossing and hoping that it worked out okay. This is a problem that has been growing for years. it's just gotten now to a crisis mode. It is just difficult to imagine that it's twice as many jobs as anything else. It's not that healthcare jobs aren't important, of course they are. But if we put guardrails around these programs, we'll allow them to thrive. I'm here because I love Medicaid. The president has already said he loves and cherishes Medicaid and Medicare. Medicaid in particular is the ultimate payer of last resort. We cannot allow these programs to be defrauded into a turmoil that they cannot pull up from. And so if we love these programs, we'll make the difficult decisions. Let me pivot from that just to describe what came out yesterday, which is the work requirement rule that our agency, and Dan Brillman and Caprice Knapp did a fantastic job writing this, dealt with a lot of states, but as you know, in the Working Families Tax Cut legislation, which I believe saved Medicaid. And the reason I say that is our actuarials told us we would be spending $5.4 trillion more dollars for this program over the next decade if we didn't deal with some of the legalized money laundering that was siphoning money out of the program. Part of the reason that this is so attractive to states is they could take money in ways that it was not designed to be used, paying people along the way so they didn't have to pay for it themselves. I get it. I understand why the governors did it, but it didn't align the president with the governors. With that law, we also had a work requirement rule. Now, what was that? The work requirement was based on concepts that date back from when Bill Clinton was president, with the temporary assistance for needy families. When the Democratic administration said the fraud is getting so bad, the abuse so big in these programs, we need to clean them up. We need to get people to try to work. It's a path to prosperity. I hope you share this belief, that we're put on this earth with agency to change our future, change the country's future, make the planet a better place. We're put here to make a difference. But if you're sitting at home, which is true for the millions of people who are able-bodied on Medicaid, on average, you're spending 6.1 hours watching television or just hanging around. That's not why you're here. So as a path to prosperity, Congress very wisely said, let's get you back into the workforce. Let's require you to get free health care coverage, to be able to work for 20 hours a week, or volunteer to make up the difference if you haven't worked 20 hours, or get an education, just participate. And so that rule came out. It's I think, beautifully written effort to try to define for our nation what your part of the puzzle is. Because if you are going to get something that of value from the American people, there should be some obligation, if you're able to. If you're not able to, if you're disabled, if you're, and one of the categories that are well defined in general, not able to work, it's different. But if you can work, you should get up and work again, because that's historically how it always was. In 1965, when Medicaid was created, that was the deal. There were 11 million people in the program. We perverted that. Yes, sir.
Doctor, thank you. Since you're here speaking on behalf of the administration, part of the reason we're asking about the president's decision to appoint Bill Pulte to be the head of National Intelligence is it's been 4 hours and we've been asking the White House why he's qualified to do so. You're a heart surgeon or a heart doctor?
Yeah.
Would you recommend a patient go see someone who isn't?
You're asking the question with the premise that Bill Pulte is not qualified. I don't know anything about his situation, and I appreciate you want an answer. I'm not going to be the one giving it to you. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. This is Elizabeth with the Daily Signal. What are you doing, first of all, to remove any illegal immigrants who are still receiving Medicaid from the program? You mentioned earlier that's something you've been working on. And then secondly, Medicaid reimbursement for Planned Parenthood will resume July 4th unless Congress acts to extend the One Big Beautiful Bill. As CMS Administrator, what's your message to Congress on that?
On the illegal immigrant side, I'll take one question at a time, if you don't mind. A lot of folks. We have, because we now can do it, a very straightforward way for the 44 states that don't have state-based Medicaid plans for us to be able to audit if the people that we're paying for are citizens or not. In the state-based plans, like I mentioned in California, and there's a few other states, Colorado, Washington, et cetera, Illinois, they have their own plans. So we have to now audit their plans. This is a challenge. And that's why, before I came here, I met with a bunch of Medicaid directors from many states, red and blue, and they want us to help rebuild the tech infrastructure of Medicaid in this country. Imagine 50 balkanized programs. You spend $20 billion a year, $20 billion for tech infrastructure, and we're not getting our money's worth. So we're putting $200 million more because of the Working Families Tax Cut legislation. We've negotiated, Dan Brillman did $600 million of in-kind contributions from the vendors to be able to get the work requirement done in an effective way. But I think it's the first step of a much larger national opportunity to fix how data flows. And one more bit on this, Medicare's billing system, which many of your relatives are using, was a 1979 era COBOL-based system. I don't even have engineers who know how to use that system. And so if you're going to really use cloud-based tools, if you want to use technology to help Americans connect better with the healthcare system, you have to update them. The president has been supportive of this, so we are upgrading the system. And my hope is that we can use the tech transformation tools of this government to bring people to work with us from the private sector. And every major tech company is a partner of ours. Now, our pledge is 700. Yes, go ahead.
Hey, I just wanted to follow up on her question behind me. If the president's in such perfect health, why does he keep going back in for checkups?
I think he likes the results. He does really well. He aces the test every single day. And I do actually believe that he is curious to make sure everything is going in the right direction. He's a very meticulous person in so many ways that are often underappreciated. But for him to want to know all the numbers and keep on top of them, it's the same reason he calls people at odd hours, because something's on his mind, he wants to deal with it. Yes, in purple.
I wanted to ask about the UFC fight here at the White House next week. The president recently invested in the parent company of UFC. Is it a conflict of interest for him to be promoting this event while he's invested in UFC's parent company? I
don't think the president sits in the Oval Office and makes individual investment decisions, but I don't know about that issue. But knowing him, I suspect someone else is making those decisions for him. But wait, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Oz. The Obamacare subsidies expired earlier this year. What negative consequences have you seen, and do you see any policy adjustments that need to be made?
Let's talk about Obamacare. Let's take a step back. 2015, 16, 17, 18, 2020, there were 9 million people on Obamacare. 9 million. Today, it's more than 20 million. Like, what happened? What happened was we completely took the guardrails off. And I know this because I'm working in the agency that actually was told to take the guardrails off. And because there wasn't an earnest desire to keep track of whether you're appropriately on it or not, but more importantly, just get the number to where we all feel good about ourselves, we had massive increases of people joining the program. We believe that 35%, roughly, of the people that are using the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare exchanges, because they've never used the program once, they've never filed a claim, may not be legit. And that actual number may translate to, I don't know, 5-6 million people we could be paying premiums for because they don't have to contribute anything. So they don't even know they're getting it. These are people who have Medicaid, and someone, often a broker, is dishonestly enrolling them on in Affordable Care Act, or they're in 2 states at once getting full insurance paid for by us in multiple states at once. So we have evaluated these numbers. They're extremely concerning. There's a very strong effort by us. We actually made a rule 2 weeks ago that starts the process. We had tried to do this when we first came into office. A court enjoined us. They did not feel we'd followed appropriate APA guidelines, government guidelines. And so we redid it and now went back out again. But if you care about the ACA, then you'll want us to take the fraud out. And let me just take a step back. If we want you to go back to work on Medicaid, what's going to happen? You're going to start making money. As you make money, you're going to make enough money, you get above the poverty level, you're going to want to buy an Affordable Care Act product. Or private industry, commercial insurers are going to start using it. That's a good thing. We're getting America back up. They're getting into work, getting them into the stratosphere, building prosperity. So we want these programs to work together. But if you've got millions of people, literally, who are getting insurance that they don't want, they don't even know they have it, and we're all paying for it, that's tens of billions of dollars we're throwing away. That increases premiums for everybody. It drives affordability down. We're not going to tolerate it anymore. Sir, in the back, in the beard. Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rose. We are happy to see you. I'm sorry, I will ask 2 questions because I'm Turkish American.
No, only one question. Doesn't matter. One question.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, the Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and American president has a good relations. And there's a report they are going to meet in Turkey and United States game in Los Angeles. Have you heard about it? And also there's a NATO summit in Turkey in July. So you're Turkish American, I don't know, do you have any idea? Are you going to join? And what you're thinking about Erdogan and Trump relations?
I have no idea about these meetings. I've not been invited to anything. I suspect I won't be invited to everything because I've got a lot of work to do here. I'll give it right there. Go ahead.
Yes. Jordan Conrad's Gateway Pundit, back to the illegal aliens on Medicare and Medicaid. Last October, you announced that you had found over $1 billion in federal tax dollars going to illegal aliens. How much has that amount increased as of today? And, it's kind of like fish in a barrel. Are these people being referred to immigration for prosecution and deportation?
The number has doubled from what I said last year. We're about $2 billion. The good news is that many states realize this is a problem, and they themselves have stopped doing this. Listen, it's the same basic story again and again. We as a nation make a decision because we're one people. Individual states have to take that decision and use it to the best of their ability. Some states don't do as good a job as other states. That's why we're looking to individual states for leadership, for better ideas to deal with many of these social problems that unfortunately begin to pile up over time, and they threaten the very foundation of our social net that supports all of us. That's why this matters so much. If you quiz the vice president, he grew up in an environment where he saw people abuse this. I know that's the case of people who are in the task force right now, the Anti-Fraud White House Task Force. So there's a passion about this, and for good reason. I mean, the president calls the vice president Elliot Ness. He wants him, he likes the fact that he's taking this seriously, he's going at it, and he's doing what's best for the American people by making some tough decisions. One last question, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Oz. Back to Bill Pulte, but with the national security angle. The president has pushed very hard to renew FISA, Section 702. Expires in 10 days, just ahead of the World Cup. And there's this heightened threat environment with the war in the Middle East. We've heard all these intel agencies talk about the threat environment these days and how people can be very concerned about it. On Capitol Hill, you've had lawmakers today raising concern about Bill Pulte, and on the Democrat side, questioning his ability to carry out that role fairly and not weaponize it. What can you say about to allay their concerns, and can you also answer a question that was posed by Susan Collins about whether Pulte has a security clearance himself?
Ma'am, I don't know anything more about Bill Pulte than you do. I did not think that would be one of the questions that would even come up here. I hadn't even heard the news when I walked out. Okay, let me leave you with, we have one last question, but I do want to. Okay, go ahead, ask me. I'll come to you. I have a GLP question. What's your question? Very
Do you
quick.
have any medical advice for the Americans out there that are suffering from a very serious ailment called Trump derangement syndrome?
I am concerned about folks who have focused their entire life energy on dislike of the president. It's disheartening to see people lost in that way, but it's treating stupid is really hard, and that becomes a real problem. And these folks are off. Now, GLP-1s.
One question on GLP. Thank you very much.
Let me just answer because I'm out of time. And
very quick one. Are Americans getting real deal medication, brand name like Wegovy, Ozempic, or it will be generic on Trump RX at $50 monthly rate?
The Trump RX product is the real deal, the true API, the pharmaceutical product that's made by the two major providers right now, which are Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. There are other companies coming into the space. We have these products that are given by these companies as part of this deal, so we like to use the real product to be able to satisfy the needs of the American consumer. It's the brand name. It's the brand name. Last question from the middle. Go, last question. Take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Oz. So Kenya basically has stopped, has asked U.S. not to build the quarantine facility there. And the people, the responders from here who are supposed to go there, do you think the Trump administration's policy of not allowing people who are exposed, Americans who are exposed to the virus, come back to the U.S. will dissuade these responders from going there?
No, I think we're going to work out with Secretary Rubio's leadership a very favorable arrangement with Kenya. I've been to Kenya. It's a beautiful country, very sophisticated people. They're going to do the right thing for everybody, and I think it's a perfect solution. I thank you very much for letting me participate. God bless you all. Take care.
Microplastics.
That's all we have time for this hour, but if you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at news.today@ntd.com. We always love to hear from you.